Welcome, dear friends, to a gentle journey through the world of anime movies, those beautiful animated films from Japan that have captured hearts worldwide with their stunning artistry, profound storytelling, and emotional depth. Tonight, we will explore 140 facts about anime cinema, from Studio Ghibli masterpieces to groundbreaking experimental films, told not with excitement but with the calm appreciation of those who cherish these works. These facts will ease you towards sleep while celebrating the medium that has given us everything from Spirited Away's magic to Akira's cyberpunk intensity to Your Name's tender romance. If you enjoy this peaceful exploration of anime movies, please consider subscribing and share with me in the comments where you're watching from tonight and what your favorite anime movie is. I love hearing from fellow fans, so settle in, close your eyes when ready, and let us begin our journey through decades of anime cinema together. Fact 1. Spirited Away became the first anime film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature in 2003, defeating Disney's Lilo and Stitch in Treasure Planet in a historic victory for Japanese animation. The win legitimized anime as a serious art form in Western eyes, with Hayao Miyazaki creating a film that transcended cultural boundaries through its universal themes of identity, greed, and growing up in a confusing world. The Oscar victory marked a turning point where anime movies were no longer seen as niche foreign films, but rather as legitimate competitors to major Hollywood animation studios. Spirited Away's success opened doors for future anime films at major awards ceremonies, proving hand-drawn animation could still captivate global audiences. Fact 2. Studio Ghibli was founded in 1985 by directors Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, along with producer Toshio Suzuki, creating what would become the most influential animation studio outside of Disney's empire. The studio's name comes from the Italian word for a hot desert wind, reflecting Miyazaki's hope that the studio would blow fresh wind through the animation industry with innovative storytelling and artistic techniques. Studio Ghibli's philosophy emphasized hand-drawn animation, environmental themes, strong female protagonists, and stories that respected children's intelligence rather than talking down to young audiences. The studio's commitment to quality over speed meant films took years to produce, with every frame receiving meticulous attention from artists dedicated to their craft. Fact 3. Hayao Miyazaki's filmmaking philosophy centers on creating works that celebrate life's beauty while acknowledging its complexity, rejecting simple good versus evil narratives in favor of morally ambiguous characters. Miyazaki insists on hand-drawing key scenes himself despite his age, believing that digital tools cannot capture the warmth and humanity that comes from an artist's hand moving across paper. His films consistently feature strong female protagonists who solve problems through courage and compassion rather than violence, reflecting his belief that feminine perspectives offer alternatives to masculine aggression dominating most adventure stories. Miyazaki's environmental concerns permeate his work, with nature depicted not as backdrop but as living force deserving respect and protection from human exploitation. Fact 4. Princess Mononoke, released in 1997 as Miyazaki's most violent and complex film, exploring the conflict between industrial progress and environmental preservation through a story without clear villains. The film's production required over 100,000 animation cells and 3 years of work, with Miyazaki initially intending it to be his final film before retirement proved impossible. Princess Mononoke broke Japanese box office records at the time, demonstrating that anime films could achieve massive commercial success while maintaining artistic integrity and thematic sophistication. The film's ambiguous ending refuses easy answers about humanity's relationship with nature, instead suggesting that understanding and coexistence require sacrifice and compromise from all sides in ways that satisfy no one completely. Fact 5. My Neighbor Totoro, released in 1988 as a gentle film about two sisters adjusting to rural life while their mother recovers in a hospital, featuring the iconic forest spirit Totoro, who became Studio Ghibli's mascot. The film performed modestly at the Japanese box office initially, but grew into a cultural phenomenon through home video releases and merchandise, with Totoro becoming one of Japan's most recognizable characters alongside Hello Kitty. Miyazaki created Totoro as embodiment of childhood wonder and the magical thinking that helps children process difficult emotions and situations they cannot fully understand. The film's success demonstrated that anime movies didn't need action or adventure to captivate audiences, that simple stories told with warmth and artistry could resonate across generations and cultures. Fact 6. Howl's Moving Castle adapted Diana Wynne Jones's British fantasy novel in 2004, with Miyazaki making significant changes to create a more pacifist narrative, condemning war and celebrating inner beauty over physical appearance. The film follows Sophie, a young woman cursed with old age, who finds refuge in a magical moving castle belonging to the vain wizard, Howl, with their relationship developing as war threatens their world. Christian Bale voiced Howl in the English dub, while Sophie was voiced by Emily Mortimer as young and Gene Simmons as elderly, creating interesting vocal transition reflecting the characters' physical transformations throughout the story. The moving castle itself represents Howl's fractured psyche, with its chaotic architecture and multiple doors connecting to different locations, symbolizing his inability to commit or face emotional vulnerability. Fact 7. Grave of the Fireflies, released in 1988 as a double feature with My Neighbor Totoro, offering devastatingly tragic counterpoint to Totoro's gentle whimsy through its story of two siblings dying during World War II's final months. Director Isao Takahata created an unflinching examination of war's impact on children, with the film's opening immediately revealing that both children die before showing how their deaths occurred through starvation and neglect. The film's power comes from its refusal to sentimentalize or provide hope, instead, forcing viewers to witness the slow deterioration of innocence and life under conditions where survival becomes impossible, despite children's efforts. Grave of the Fireflies remains one of anime's most emotionally devastating experiences, beautiful in its animation while utterly heartbreaking in its narrative, proving that animated films could tackle the darkest subjects with artistic maturity. Fact 8. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, released in 1984, before Studio Ghibli's official founding, but its success convinced Miyazaki and Takahata that establishing a dedicated studio would allow them greater creative freedom and artistic control. The film depicts a post-apocalyptic world where toxic forests and giant insects threaten humanity's remnants, with Princess Nausicaa working to understand rather than destroy the ecosystem that others fear. Nausicaa represents Miyazaki's ideal protagonist, brave, compassionate, scientifically curious, and committed to finding peaceful solutions, even when violence seems easier and more practical. The film's environmental themes would become Miyazaki's signature, with Nausicaa establishing the template for heroines who bridge divides through understanding and empathy rather than conquest or domination, showing that strength includes vulnerability and openness. Fact 9. Castle in the Sky, released in 1986 as Studio Ghibli's first official production, telling a steampunk adventure about two children searching for the legendary floating city of Laputa while pursued by pirates and government agents. The film showcased Miyazaki's love for aviation and flying machines, with elaborate sequences of airships and flying contraptions rendered with meticulous attention to mechanical detail and aerodynamic plausibility. Castle in the Sky's themes explore how technology can serve either liberation or oppression, depending on who controls it, with Laputa representing advanced civilization that destroyed itself through military ambition and disconnection from Earth. The film's influence on adventure, anime, and video games cannot be overstated, establishing visual and narrative templates that countless works would reference and build upon for decades to come. Fact 10. Kiki's Delivery Service, released in 1989 as Miyazaki's gentlest coming-of-age story, following a young witch who leaves home to establish herself in a seaside town where she starts a delivery service using her flying abilities. The film explores creative burnout and depression through Kiki's temporary loss of her flying powers, depicting how pressure and self-doubt can rob us of abilities we once performed effortlessly and joyfully. Miyazaki eliminated the romance subplot from the original novel, keeping Kiki's relationship with Tombo as friendship rather than romance, to maintain focus on Kiki's personal growth and professional development. The film's warm depiction of community support and the kindness of strangers offers comfort to viewers facing their own periods of doubt, suggesting that connection and persistence eventually restore what depression temporarily steals. Fact 11. Porco Rosso, released in 1992 as Miyazaki's most personal film, featuring a World War I pilot cursed to have a pig's face who works as bounty hunter in the Adriatic Sea during the interwar period. The film's melancholy tone reflects Miyazaki's complicated feelings about aviation, war, and masculinity, with Porco choosing to remain a pig rather than return to humanity and its endless cycles of conflict and violence. The film celebrates the romance of early aviation while acknowledging how those same flying machines became instruments of death during both world wars that Miyazaki's father profited from by manufacturing airplane parts. Porco Rosso's bittersweet ending leaves Porco's fate ambiguous, suggesting that some wounds from war cannot fully heal, and that sometimes remaining apart from society is preferable to participating in its hypocrisies and cruelties. Fact 12. The Wind Rises, released in 2013 as Miyazaki's controversial biography of Jiro Horikoshi, the engineer who designed the Zero fighter plane used by Japan during World War II, mixing historical drama with surreal dream sequences. The film faced criticism for allegedly glorifying a man whose creations killed thousands, though Miyazaki insisted the film questioned the morality of pursuing dreams when those dreams enabled destruction and suffering. The Wind Rises became Miyazaki's meditation on his own career and his father's wartime work, asking whether beautiful creations remain beautiful when used for terrible purposes, and whether artists can escape responsibility for how their work is weaponized. The film's mature themes and slow pacing made it Miyazaki's least accessible work for children, representing his attempt to create something for adults who had grown up watching his films. Fact 13. Isao Takahata's directing style differed fundamentally from Miyazaki's, favoring realism and emotional devastation over fantasy and hope, creating films that challenged viewers rather than comforting them with escapist narratives. Takahata's films like Grave of the Fireflies and The Tale of the Princess Kaguya featured minimal music and long stretches of silence, forcing audiences to sit with discomfort and sadness without relief. His animation style emphasized natural movement and realistic timing rather than the exaggerated expressions and dynamic action typical of most anime, making his films feel more like live-action dramas rendered in animation. Takahata's uncompromising vision made his films less commercially successful than Miyazaki's but artistically revolutionary, proving that animation could achieve the same emotional sophistication and thematic complexity as any prestigious live-action film. Fact 14. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, released in 2013 as Takahata's final film, adapting a 10th-century Japanese folktale through revolutionary animation style resembling moving watercolor paintings and charcoal sketches. The film's production took 8 years and cost over 5 billion yen, making it one of the most expensive anime productions ever, with every frame hand-drawn to achieve its unique aesthetic. Princess Kaguya's themes explore how society's expectations destroy individual freedom, particularly for women whose lives are dictated by others' desires and ambitions rather than their own wishes and dreams. The film's climax features one of animation's most breathtaking sequences, as Kaguya runs through increasingly abstract landscapes, while her despair literally tears apart the carefully rendered world around her, visualizing emotional breakdown through artistic dissolution. Fact 15. Only Yesterday, released in 1991 as Takahata's meditation on memory, regret, and the paths not taken, following a single Tokyo woman who reflects on her 5th grade year while vacationing in the countryside. The film's structure alternates between present-day scenes and childhood flashbacks, with Takahata deliberately changing animation styles between time periods to emphasize how memory distorts and idealizes the past. Only Yesterday became one of Japan's highest-grossing films of 1,991, despite having no fantasy elements, action sequences, or even particularly dramatic plot, proving that audiences would embrace contemplative character studies in animated form. The film's success internationally took decades, as Disney initially refused to release it in America, believing Western audiences wouldn't accept an anime film about a single woman thinking about her life, underestimating both the film's universal appeal and viewers' sophistication. Fact 16. Your Name, released in 2016 as a body swap romantic fantasy that became the highest-grossing anime film of all time, until Demon Slayer Mugen Train surpassed it, earning over $350 million worldwide. Director Makoto Shinkai crafted a love story transcending time and space, with 2 teenagers switching bodies across years without realizing temporal displacement until tragedy forces them to confront the truth. The film's success defied industry expectations that anime films couldn't compete with Hollywood blockbusters internationally, with Your Name achieving widespread mainstream success in countries where anime typically remained niche. Shinkai's meticulous attention to realistic backgrounds and lighting effects created photorealistic environments that contrasted with stylized character designs, making the world feel tangible and lived in, despite the fantastical premise requiring audiences to accept impossible rules about time and fate. Fact 17. Makoto Shinkai emerged as Miyazaki's successor in public consciousness, though Shinkai resists the comparison, noting that his films explore romantic longing and urban isolation rather than environmental themes and fantasy adventures. Shinkai's background in creating romantic visual novels and his early work as essentially a one-man animation studio gave his films distinctive aesthetic, prioritizing beautiful imagery and emotional atmosphere over complex plotting. His films consistently feature characters separated by distance, physical, temporal, or dimensional, with communication proving difficult or impossible, reflecting anxieties about connection in increasingly digital and fragmented modern society. Critics sometimes dismiss Shinkai's work as style over substance, beautiful but emotionally shallow, though his commercial success suggests audiences respond powerfully to his particular blend of visual splendor and bittersweet romance that acknowledges that love doesn't always conquer all obstacles. Fact 18. Weathering with You. Released in 2019 as Shinkai's follow-up to Your Name, featuring a teenage runaway who meets a girl with power to manipulate weather, exploring climate change and the selfishness inherent in love. The film courted controversy with its ending, where the protagonist chooses his personal happiness over potentially saving Tokyo from permanent rain, arguing that individual relationships matter more than abstract greater good. Shinkai created visual spectacle from Tokyo's flooding, rendering rain and water with unprecedented detail and beauty that made environmental catastrophe seem almost sublime in its terrible magnificence. The film's ambiguous moral stance, validating the protagonist's selfish choice while showing its catastrophic consequences, divided audiences between those who found it romantically powerful and those who considered it irresponsible in the age of climate crisis. Fact 19. 5 centimeters per second, released in 2007 as Shinkai's most melancholy film, structured in 3 segments, following a man who never moves past his childhood love, watching helplessly as time and distance make reconnection impossible. The film's title refers to the speed at which cherry blossoms fall, symbolizing the slow but inevitable drifting apart that time imposes on all relationships despite our desperate attempts to maintain connections. Shinkai refuses to provide happy ending or reunion, instead forcing viewers to accept that some relationships end not through betrayal or drama, but simply through the accumulation of small distances and missed chances. The film's final shot has become iconic in anime communities, 2 former lovers passing each other at a train crossing, one turning back but the other continuing forward, perfectly visualizing how people move on at different speeds. Fact 20. The Garden of Words, released in 2013 as Shinkai's shortest theatrical film at only 46 minutes, focusing on a student and an older woman who meet in a park during rainy mornings, sharing quiet companionship without understanding each other's circumstances. The film showcases Shinkai's obsession with rain, with every droplet, puddle, and wet surface rendered with photographic accuracy that makes the rainy garden feel more real than reality itself. The age gap relationship courted controversy, though Shinkai carefully kept the relationship ambiguous and emotionally complex rather than romantic, exploring how people seek shelter in each other during personal storms. The Garden of Words proved that anime films didn't need feature-length runtimes to achieve emotional impact, that 46 minutes of exquisitely crafted atmosphere and subtle character development could resonate as powerfully as sprawling epics. Fact 21. Suzume, released in 2022 as Shinkai's meditation on the 2011 Tonso Hoku earthquake and tsunami, following a girl who must close supernatural doors across Japan to prevent disasters while searching for a mysterious man transformed into a chair. The film processes collective national trauma through fantasy adventure, with abandoned places across Japan serving as settings where doors to the other world threaten to open and unleash earthquakes. Shinkai faced criticism for potentially exploiting real tragedy for entertainment, though many Japanese viewers appreciated his attempt to create art, helping the nation process grief and loss that remain difficult to discuss directly. The film's emotional climax takes place in the devastated area where Suzume lost her mother, with Shinkai using animation to revisit spaces that no longer exist, preserving memory through art when physical reconstruction has erased the past. Fact 22. Makoto Shinkai's signature visual style features dramatic lighting effects, lens flares, detailed cloud formations, and shafts of sunlight breaking through atmospheric conditions that create almost religious atmosphere around mundane settings. His obsessive attention to realistic backgrounds means his films often feature real locations in Tokyo and rural Japan, with fans making pilgrimages to photograph the actual spots depicted in his works. Shinkai's use of light symbolizes the ineffable quality of memory and longing, with his glowing skies and radiant landscapes representing not reality, but rather how memory idealizes past moments and distant places. Critics note that Shinkai's characters often seem less developed than his backgrounds, suggesting he's more interested in rendering feeling and atmosphere than in complex psychological character studies, making his films succeed or fail based on whether viewers accept his prioritization of visual poetry over narrative complexity. Fact 23. Akira, released in 1988 as landmark cyberpunk film set in Neo-Tokyo in 2019, remarkably predicting that Tokyo would host the Olympics in 2020 through background detail that seemed like science fiction until it became reality. The film's production budget of over 1 billion yen made it the most expensive anime film at the time, allowing unprecedented detail and over 160,000 animation cells for a film featuring elaborate destruction sequences and body horror. Director Katsuhiro Otomo adapted his own manga, compressing thousands of pages into 2 hours while maintaining the story's themes about youth, power, corruption, and how society sacrificed children to fuel their ambitions and conflicts. Akira's cyberpunk aesthetic, neon-lit cities, motorcycle gangs, psychic powers, government conspiracies, influenced countless films, anime, and video games, essentially defining what Western audiences thought anime looked like for decades. Fact 24. Akira's animation quality surpassed contemporary anime standards through techniques like pre-scoring the music before animation began, allowing animators to synchronize action precisely with the soundtrack's rhythm and intensity. The film featured realistic lip-syncing matching the Japanese dialogue exactly, unusual in anime where mouth movements typically approximate speech rather than matching it precisely as in Western animation. Akira's color palette utilized over 300 colors, including 50 custom-created colors specifically for the film, giving it visual richness that standard anime's limited color palettes couldn't achieve. The film's night scenes were particularly revolutionary, rendered primarily in blues and purples rather than black, creating nocturnal environments that felt alive with electric energy rather than simply dark and empty like most anime's night sequences. Fact 25. Ghost in the Shell, released in 1995 as philosophical science fiction, examining consciousness, identity, and what makes someone human when bodies can be completely replaced with cybernetic components and memories can be hacked or fabricated. Director Mamoru Oshii created contemplative film featuring long sequences without dialogue, where the protagonist simply exists in her futuristic city, raising questions about how much exposition modern audiences actually need. The film's opening sequence depicting the creation of a cybernetic body became iconic for its blend of beauty and body horror, showing mechanical assembly of human form with clinical detail. Ghost in the Shell's influence extended beyond anime, with the Wachowskis citing it as primary inspiration for The Matrix's visual style and philosophical themes about reality, consciousness, and the nature of existence in an age where digital and physical blur. Fact 26. Ghost in the Shell's philosophical depth came from questioning whether consciousness requires biological substrate, or whether artificial intelligence achieving sufficient complexity deserves recognition as truly alive and conscious. The film explores how identity becomes unstable when memories can be altered or implanted, asking what remains of you if every experience you remember might be artificial construction serving someone else's purposes. Major Motoko Kusanagi's crisis centers on her inability to verify her own existence if her cybernetic body can be replaced and her brain can be hacked. How does she know she was ever human at all, rather than being AI programmed to believe it had human past? The film refuses easy answers, ending ambiguously with Kusanagi merging with an AI entity, transcending humanity entirely in ways that might represent evolution or extinction, depending on your philosophical perspective about what consciousness requires. Fact 27. The Matrix's directors required all cast members to watch Ghost in the Shell before filming began, with the Wachowskis essentially pitching their film to Warner Brothers as, "We want to make this Japanese anime as live-action movie." Ghost in the Shell's influence appears throughout The Matrix, from the digital raincoat aesthetic to the philosophical questions about reality, to specific shot compositions directly recreating anime sequences. The anime's examination of how technology mediates human experience and identity provided philosophical framework that The Matrix popularized for mainstream Western audiences who hadn't encountered these ideas in animated form. Ghost in the Shell's impact demonstrates how anime films served as idea laboratories where philosophical and visual concepts developed before Western filmmakers adapted and repackaged them for larger audiences, showing anime as innovator rather than derivative medium. Fact 28. Metropolis released in 2001 as Rintaro's adaptation of Osamu Tezuka's manga, inspired by Fritz Lang's 1927 German expressionist film, creating retro-futuristic aesthetic, blending Art Deco architecture with advanced robotics. The film features striking visual contrast between its cartoonish character designs, reminiscent of 1940 seconds animation, and elaborately detailed steampunk backgrounds rendered with early CGI integration. Metropolis explores class division through vertical city design, where wealthy humans occupy sunlit upper levels, while robots and poor humans toil in dark industrial zones below, making spatial arrangement literally represent social hierarchy. The film's climax features catastrophic destruction of the titular city, while Ray Charles's "I Can't Stop Loving You" plays ironically, creating dissonance between cheerful jazz and apocalyptic imagery that makes the devastation more disturbing through tonal contradiction. Fact 29. Patlabor 2. The movie released in 1993 is Mamoru Oshii's political thriller exploring terrorism, media manipulation, and how democracies respond to security threats by sacrificing freedoms in exchange for safety that may be illusory. The film features minimal mecha action despite being sequel to mecha anime series, instead focusing on police detectives investigating conspiracy involving military exercises and information warfare. Oshii created contemplative film featuring lengthy dialogue scenes discussing political philosophy and the nature of peacetime versus war, with action sequences reserved for the climax after establishing complex geopolitical stakes. Patlabor 2 influenced science fiction filmmaking through its realistic depiction of near-future Tokyo and its sophisticated treatment of political themes, demonstrating that anime could examine contemporary political issues with intelligence and nuance, typically associated with prestige live-action dramas. Fact 30. Cyber City, Oedo, 808, released as 3-episode OVA, about cyberpunk criminals forced to work as police in violent future Tokyo, featuring extreme violence, cybernetic body horror, and punk aesthetic that made it cult classic in the West. The series showcased anime's willingness to explore mature content through science fiction frameworks, with graphic violence and dystopian themes appealing to Western audiences seeking alternatives to Disney's family-friendly animation. Cyber City Oedo's English dub became notorious for creative profanity and aggressive localization that amplified the source material's edginess, creating versions that diverged significantly from the original Japanese. The OVA format original video animation released direct to home video allowed creators to make content too adult or niche for theatrical release or television broadcast, creating space for experimental and mature anime that influenced the medium's evolution. Fact 31. A Silent Voice released in 2016 as Naoko Yamada's adaptation of manga, exploring bullying, disability, depression, and redemption through story of deaf girl and the boy who tormented her in elementary school seeking forgiveness years later. The film depicts bullying with uncomfortable honesty, showing how children can be casually cruel and how that cruelty creates lasting trauma for both victims and perpetrators who later develop enough empathy to feel guilt. Yamada used visual metaphors like X marks over faces to represent the protagonist's social anxiety and inability to look people in the eye, showing psychological state through animation techniques rather than exposition. A Silent Voice handles suicide contemplation seriously, depicting suicidal ideation without sensationalizing it, earning praise from mental health advocates for realistic portrayal of how depression and guilt manifest in adolescents seeking escape from overwhelming shame. Fact 32. I Wanna Eat Your Pancreas released in 2018 as tearjerker about terminally ill girl who befriends classmate by forcing him to accompany her through bucket list, despite his preference for isolation and books. The provocative title comes from the girl's belief that eating someone's diseased organ transfers their healthy spirit to heal illness, making the title both literal and metaphorical about human connection. The film explores how knowing death approaches changes how you live, with the protagonist learning from the girl's determination to experience everything fully rather than treating life as obligation to endure. I Want to Eat Your Pancreas became successful despite or because of its melodramatic premise, with audiences embracing emotionally manipulative storytelling that guarantees cathartic crying through beautiful tragedy, where good people suffer and die young, offering safe space for emotional release. Fact 33. Maquia. When the Promised Flower Blooms released in 2018 as Mari Okada's directorial debut, exploring motherhood and mortality through fantasy about immortal woman who adopts human baby and must watch him age while she remains eternally youthful. The film examines how parenting requires letting children go, with Makia's immortality forcing her to experience loss repeatedly as humans she loves age and die within her unchanging lifetime. Okada drew on her own experiences and anxieties about aging and relationships to create emotionally resonant fantasy that used supernatural premise to explore very human fears about time, loss, and watching those we love drift away. Makia's climax features the now ancient adopted son dying while Makia remains young, inverting natural order where parents die before children, creating heartbreaking meditation on how immortality becomes curse when it means eternal grief watching generations pass. Fact 34. The Anthem of the Heart, released in 2015 as a One Pictures film about girl who develops psychosomatic inability to speak after childhood trauma, forced to communicate through text and music in high school musical production. The film explores how trauma manifests physically, with the protagonist's voice loss representing punishment she believes she deserves for speaking truth that destroyed her family through divorce. The use of music and eventually sign language shows alternative communication methods and how expression finds paths when primary channels close, suggesting that silence doesn't mean absence of voice. The Anthem of the Heart addresses mental health and trauma recovery through metaphor, making psychological concepts accessible to young audiences while avoiding clinical language that might distance viewers from recognizing their own struggles in the protagonist's journey toward healing. Fact 35. Josie, The Tiger and the Fish, released in 2020 as Bones Studios' adaptation of short story about paraplegic young woman who lives vicariously through books until meeting university student who becomes her caretaker and eventually romantic partner. The film handles disability thoughtfully, showing both Josie's internalized ableism and society's external barriers, while avoiding inspiration porn that treats disabled people as objects of pity or admiration rather than complex individuals. The romance develops slowly and believably, with the film exploring how Josie's disability affects but doesn't define their relationship, how she must overcome fear and learned helplessness, while he must examine whether he's truly supportive or unconsciously patronizing. Josie demonstrates anime's increasing willingness to feature disabled protagonists in romantic narratives, normalizing disability as aspect of character rather than tragic obstacle defining entire identity or purpose in story. Fact 36. Colorful, released in 2010 as Keiichi Hara's adaptation of novel about soul, given second chance by inhabiting body of middle school boy who committed suicide, gradually learning to appreciate life despite overwhelming circumstances that drove original occupant to death. The film addresses teen suicide seriously and sensitively, showing how depression makes everything appear meaningless and how connection and purpose must be actively constructed rather than passively received. Colorful uses realistic animation style, emphasizing mundane suburban settings and everyday routines to ground its supernatural premise, suggesting that meaningful life exists in ordinary moments rather than grand adventures or achievements. The film's title refers to how the protagonist learns to see the world in color again, after depression made everything seem gray and worthless, using visual metaphor to represent recovery and rediscovering reasons to continue living. Fact 37. Wolf Children, released in 2012 as Mamoru Hosoda's story about single mother raising half werewolf children after their father dies, exploring themes of parenting, identity, and choosing between human and wolf natures. The film depicts parenthood realistically through fantasy metaphor, with the werewolf children's unpredictable transformations representing the chaos and challenges of raising children whose needs you don't fully understand and can't always meet. Hosoda shows the mother's love through her exhaustion, frustration, and determination to support her children regardless of which path they choose, whether integration into human society or embrace of their wolf heritage. Wolf Children earned praise for its honest depiction of single motherhood's difficulties, showing parenting as ongoing struggle requiring sacrifice without guaranteeing success, or that children will make choices parents hope for, validating parental anxiety while celebrating parental love. Fact 38. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, released in 2006 as Mamoru Hosoda's breakthrough film, featuring high school girl who gains time travel ability and uses it frivolously before learning that changing the past creates consequences she cannot predict or control. The film combines science fiction concepts with adolescent drama, using time travel as metaphor for how teenagers wish they could undo mistakes and avoid consequences, while gradually learning that running from problems makes them worse. Hosoda's animation emphasizes physicality and weight, with the protagonist's literal leaping through time, conveying the exhilaration and terror of trying to control life through magical thinking, rather than accepting responsibility for choices. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time established Hosoda as major director, showing his talent for emotional storytelling grounded in realistic character relationships, despite fantastic premises, making the science fiction element serve character development rather than overwhelming it. Fact 39. Summer Wars released in 2009 as Hosoda's love letter to extended families, featuring timid math student who must save a virtual reality world that controls infrastructure worldwide while navigating his crush's enormous traditional family. The film contrasts modern technology dependence with traditional family bonds, suggesting that human connection and family support systems remain essential even especially in digital age, where algorithmic relationships replace human community. Summer Wars presents optimistic vision where collective action by ordinary people across generations solves crises that experts and authorities cannot handle, making it fundamentally hopeful despite featuring near-apocalyptic stakes. The film's depiction of the family working together combines humor and warmth, showing how family dysfunction and strength coexist, how multiple generations can communicate and support each other when crisis demands collaboration, despite normal everyday frictions and misunderstandings. Fact 40. Hotarubi no Mori, released in 2011 as 45-minute tragic romance about girl who befriends forest spirit, with one crucial limitation: if humans touch him, he will disappear forever, making their relationship eternally close yet physically distant. The film explores how love requires restraint and how the inability to touch someone creates constant tension between desire for closeness and fear that one mistake destroys everything. The inevitable tragic ending, where the spirit disappears after accidentally being touched by human at festival, creates bittersweet conclusion about how temporary things become more precious because of their impermanence. Hotarubi no Mori influenced Your Name through its director Takahiro Omori's visual style and theme of connections that transcend normal reality, demonstrating how anime films reference and build upon each other's techniques and themes, creating ongoing conversation within the medium about how to depict love, loss, and the ephemeral nature of relationships. Fact 41. Osamu Tezuka revolutionized anime and manga as god of manga, whose distinctive art style and storytelling techniques influenced every subsequent creator, with his work on Astro Boy establishing templates that remain recognizable today. Tezuka's films like 1001 Nights and Cleopatra experimented with adult-oriented animation in the late 1960 seconds and early 1970 seconds, proving anime could address mature themes and audiences beyond children. His influence extended beyond Japan, with Tezuka studying Disney films obsessively before adapting and transforming those techniques into distinctly Japanese aesthetic, emphasizing large eyes, simplified features, and dynamic action. Tezuka's philosophy that manga and anime should educate while entertaining led him to create works addressing war, discrimination, science, and history, demonstrating that popular entertainment could engage with serious themes without becoming didactic or losing entertainment value. Fact 42. Toei Animation's early features in the 1950 seconds and 1960 seconds established anime theatrical traditions, with films like Hakujaden attempting to create Japanese equivalents to Disney features using similar production methods and storytelling techniques. These early anime films faced accusations of simply copying Disney rather than developing original Japanese aesthetic, with defenders arguing that learning from Disney was a necessary stage before anime could develop its own distinctive identity. The early Toei features introduced color animation and elaborate production values to Japanese audiences, demonstrating that anime could achieve technical sophistication, rivaling Western animation despite Japan's limited resources and war-torn economy. The studio's emphasis on training new animators created a pipeline of talent that would eventually disperse throughout the industry, with Toei-trained animators becoming founders and key staff of virtually every major anime studio that followed, making Toei the unofficial Academy of Japanese Animation. Fact 43. Mobile Suit Gundam movies compiled the television series into trilogy that refined and streamlined the story, establishing that theatrical compilations of TV anime could succeed commercially while introducing new audiences to complex narratives. The Gundam film's success created a template followed by countless anime franchises, where TV series are condensed into feature films with improved animation, additional scenes, and better pacing than weekly broadcast schedules allowed. Director Yoshiyuki Tomino used the compilation format to revise his original vision, removing episodes he disliked and tightening narrative focus on political conflict and character development over mecha action. The Gundam films demonstrated that anime could sustain complex, serialized storytelling across multiple theatrical releases, treating audiences as capable of following intricate political plots and moral ambiguity, rather than requiring simple good versus evil narratives, with each film being self-contained. Fact 44. Space Battleship Yamato Films built on the TV series to create epic space opera, exploring militarism, sacrifice, and Japan's relationship with its World War II legacy through metaphor of crew resurrecting the sunken battleship Yamato to save humanity from alien threats in distant space. The film's themes resonated with Japanese audiences processing their nation's recent history, with the Yamato sunk in historical battle being reborn as vessel of hope rather than militaristic symbol, suggesting redemption through different purpose. Director Leiji Matsumoto created visual style emphasizing romantic melancholy, with characters featuring elongated bodies and sorrowful expressions that became his signature aesthetic, influencing countless subsequent space anime. Space Battleship Yamato's success proved anime films could achieve serious box office numbers, encouraging studios to invest more resources in theatrical productions rather than treating anime as exclusively television or direct-to-video medium. Fact 45. Belladonna of Sadness, released in 1973 as experimental adult animated film, featuring watercolor animation, psychedelic imagery, and explicit sexual content exploring themes of female oppression and witchcraft through medieval European setting. The film's production nearly bankrupted its studio, Mushi Production, with its artistic ambition and unmarketable subject matter, making commercial success impossible despite creating visually stunning and thematically provocative work. Belladonna's animation consisted largely of panning across static paintings with minimal character movement, creating illustrated storybook aesthetic that influenced music videos and experimental animation decades later. The film remained obscure for decades until rediscovery by art house audiences appreciating its feminist themes, psychedelic aesthetics, and willingness to use animation for adult psychological and sexual themes rather than action or comedy, demonstrating that anime's potential extended far beyond commercial entertainment. Fact 46. The Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon, released in 1963 as early Toei feature retelling Japanese mythology through anime, establishing that traditional folklore could be adapted into animated features successfully. The film introduced many animators who would become industry legends, with Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki both working on the production in early career positions before their directorial fame. The mythological subject matter demonstrated anime's potential for cultural preservation and education, making ancient stories accessible to modern children through vibrant animation and dramatic action. The film's success encouraged studios to continue producing features based on Japanese folklore and literature, creating tradition of anime that educated audiences about their cultural heritage while entertaining them with adventure and spectacle. Fact 47. Disney's influence on early anime was undeniable, with Japanese animators studying Snow White, Bambi, and other classics to learn animation principles before developing techniques suited to Japan's more limited budgets and different aesthetic preferences. The cultural exchange went both directions, with Disney later incorporating anime influences into films like Atlantis and Treasure Planet, after recognizing anime's growing global influence and distinct visual storytelling methods. Early anime's debt to Disney included character designs with large eyes, musical numbers, animal sidekicks, and emphasis on fluid movement, though Japanese animators gradually developed alternative approaches, emphasizing limited animation, dramatic stills, and different emotional register. The relationship between Disney and anime demonstrates how artistic movements develop through cultural exchange and competition, with each medium learning from and pushing against the other to evolve techniques and aesthetics beyond what either could achieve in isolation. And so we close this first part of our journey through anime cinema's history, having explored the foundational works and legendary creators who established anime as global art form, deserving recognition alongside any nation's filmmaking traditions. We have witnessed Studio Ghibli's profound impact on how animation could tell mature, emotionally complex stories, how Makoto Shinkai brought anime into the modern era with photorealistic backgrounds and bittersweet romances, how cyberpunk classics proved anime could explore philosophical questions through science fiction spectacle, and how emotional dramas demonstrated animation's capacity to address mental health, disability, and the deepest human sorrows. We have traced anime's evolution from Disney-influenced beginnings to distinctive aesthetic traditions that influenced world cinema in return. As you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself walking through the various worlds these films created, flying over Howl's moving castle, riding Totoro through moonlit forests, standing on the beaches where space and time collapse in your name, exploring Neo-Tokyo's neon-lit streets before Akira's destruction, sitting quietly in the garden while rain falls with impossible beauty. These films have given us worlds to escape into, but more importantly, they have given us mirrors reflecting our own experiences of growth, loss, love, and searching for meaning in beautiful but often cruel reality. Let these images carry you into dreams where hand-drawn lines create magic, where every frame is painted with care, where stories respect your intelligence while touching your heart. Sleep peacefully, knowing that anime films continue being created by artists who believe animation deserves to tackle any subject, explore any emotion, and achieve any artistic goal that live-action cinema can accomplish. Tomorrow we will explore more of anime cinema's treasures, the visionary directors, revolutionary techniques, and cultural impact that make this medium essential to understanding contemporary global filmmaking. Rest now, and may your dreams be as beautiful as the carefully painted backgrounds in your favorite anime films, as moving as the quiet moments between characters learning to understand each other, and as profound as the questions these works raise about what it means to be human in a changing, complicated, heartbreaking, and ultimately beautiful world that exists both on screen and beyond it. Fact 48. Perfect Blue released in 1997 as Satoshi Kon's directorial debut, following a pop idol who transitions to acting while being stalked, creating psychological thriller that blurs reality and delusion until viewers cannot distinguish truth from the protagonist's fragmenting mind. The film's editing techniques seamlessly transition between scenes without cuts, making it impossible to determine when reality ends and hallucination begins, creating disorientation that mirrors the protagonist's mental state. Perfect Blue influenced Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan, with Aronofsky purchasing remake rights and recreating specific shots in his films. The movie's exploration of celebrity culture, parasocial relationships, and how media consumption distorts identity proved prescient about social media's psychological impacts decades before platforms emerged. Fact 49. Millennium Actress, released in 2001 as Kan's love letter to Japanese cinema history, following documentary filmmakers interviewing a retired actress whose memories blend with the roles she played across decades. The film's innovative structure seamlessly merges past and present, with interviewers appearing in the actress's memories and historical settings, shifting between eras without transitions, creating dreamlike narrative flow. Kan used the actress's career spanning from samurai films to space adventures to chronicle Japanese cinema's evolution, while exploring how memory, art, and identity interweave until we cannot separate who we are from roles we've played. The film demonstrates how lives become stories we tell ourselves, with truth and fiction merging until the narrative we construct matters more than objective facts about what actually occurred. Fact 50. Paprika released in 2006 as Kan's science fiction masterpiece about device allowing therapists to enter patients' dreams, which get stolen and used to merge dreams with reality, creating surreal nightmare, threatening to dissolve boundaries between conscious and unconscious minds. The film's dream sequences feature impossible transformations and physics-defying imagery that influenced Christopher Nolan's Inception, particularly the folding city and dream invasion concepts that Nolan adapted for his blockbuster. Kan's use of dreams allowed exploring animation's full potential for surrealism, with objects transforming mid-scene and characters shifting identities fluidly in ways live action cannot achieve without obvious CGI artifice. Paprika represents culmination of Kan's career, exploring psychology, identity, and how technology mediates human consciousness, themes that feel increasingly relevant as virtual reality and digital life become indistinguishable from physical existence. Fact 51. Tokyo Godfathers, released in 2003 as Kan's only non-psychological thriller, following three homeless people who find an abandoned baby on Christmas Eve and search for its parents across Tokyo. The film blends comedy and drama while treating homelessness seriously, showing its characters' dignity and humanity rather than using them as colorful background or objects of pity. Kan researched homeless communities extensively, depicting the practical realities of street life while creating genuinely funny situations emerging from character rather than mocking their circumstances. Tokyo Godfathers subverts typical Christmas movie sentimentality while ultimately affirming it, suggesting that miracles might exist but require human compassion and effort to manifest. that found families matter as much as biological ones, and that redemption remains possible for everyone regardless of past mistakes. Fact 52. Satoshi Kon's editing techniques revolutionized anime through match cuts, where one scene's final frame perfectly transitions into the next scene's opening, creating seamless flow that collapses time and space. His transitions often used visual or thematic connections rather than traditional dissolves or fades, with characters continuing movement between completely different settings or time periods, making viewers work to understand when scene changes occurred. Kon's influence extended beyond anime into live-action filmmaking, with directors worldwide studying his editing to learn how animation's freedom from physical constraints could teach new approaches to cinematic continuity. His techniques proved that animation could innovate film language itself, rather than just applying techniques developed in live action, making anime a laboratory for visual storytelling experiments that other media later adopted. Fact 53. Satoshi Kon died in 2010 at age 46 from pancreatic cancer, leaving unfinished film Dreaming Machine that was later abandoned due to lack of funding and Kon's irreplaceable vision. His death devastated the anime industry, with directors across generations mourning the loss of innovator who was expanding what anime could achieve thematically and technically. Kon's final blog post thanked fans and colleagues, expressing satisfaction with his career despite its premature end, demonstrating grace and perspective about mortality that reflected the psychological depth he brought to his films. His legacy includes not just his 4 features and 1 TV series, but also the countless animators and directors he influenced to push boundaries and explore psychological complexity through animation's unique possibilities. Fact 54. Dreaming Machine was meant to be Kon's first family-friendly film, a robot adventure story that would have shown his range beyond psychological thrillers while maintaining his sophisticated visual storytelling and thematic depth. Madhouse Studio attempted to continue production after Kon's death, but eventually abandoned the project, determining that, without Kon's vision guiding every creative decision, the film would be generic rather than the masterpiece he intended. The unfinished film represents what anime lost, with Kon's death, an innovator entering his prime, whose future works might have achieved mainstream commercial success while maintaining artistic integrity. Some production materials and concept art have been released, showing glimpses of what might have been, making Dreaming Machine anime's most significant lost masterpiece, forever unfinished, yet forever inspiring speculation about Kon's unrealized potential. Fact 55. The Boy and the Beast, released in 2015, as Mamoru Hosoda's story about orphaned boy who stumbles into Beast World and becomes apprenticed to powerful but undisciplined warrior, exploring mentorship, found family, and choosing between 2 worlds. The film features Hosoda's signature blend of fantastical settings and grounded emotional conflicts, with the Beast World's elaborate design serving as backdrop for exploring very human struggles with abandonment, anger, and learning to trust others. The climax unexpectedly shifts to contemporary Tokyo, where the protagonist must confront real-world villain using strength gained in fantasy world, suggesting that growth in safe, imaginative spaces prepares us for actual challenges. The Boy and the Beast earned commercial success and critical praise for its action sequences and emotional depth, establishing Hosoda as bankable director whose films could achieve both artistic and financial success. Fact 56. Belle released in 2021 as Hosoda's futuristic reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, set in virtual reality world, where shy teenager becomes famous singer while investigating the mysterious beast whose violent behavior gets him hunted by the platform's authorities. The film explores identity performance in digital spaces, showing how people present different selves online versus physical life, finding confidence and expression through avatars that offline shyness prevents. Belle's stunning musical sequences blend CGI and traditional animation, creating a virtual world that feels distinct from physical reality while maintaining Hosoda's emotional authenticity and grounded character relationships despite fantastic setting. The film addresses cyberbullying and online mob justice, suggesting that internet's anonymity enables both liberation from social constraints and cruelty toward those who violate community norms, making virtual worlds simultaneously more and less human than physical existence. Fact 57. Mirai, released in 2018 as Hosoda's most personal film, exploring 4-year-old's jealousy when new baby sister arrives. With the boy visiting past and future through magical encounters in his family's garden, the film's structure resembles young child's scattered attention, with vignettes rather than traditional plot progression, capturing how children experience time as series of present moments without adult understanding of causality and continuity. Mirai addresses sibling rivalry honestly, showing the protagonist's genuine anger and resentment without judging him, validating children's difficult emotions, while showing how understanding family history helps contextualize personal struggles. The film divided critics. Some praised its imaginative sequences and emotional authenticity, while others found it meandering and indulgent. But parents widely embraced its recognition that family expansion creates real trauma for children, losing exclusive parental attention regardless of how much they eventually love new siblings. Fact 58. Mamoru Hosoda left Studio Ghibli after creative conflicts regarding Howl's Moving Castle, which he was originally slated to direct before Hayao Miyazaki decided to direct it himself, forcing Hosoda out and creating lingering bitterness about wasted preparation time. This rejection ultimately benefited anime by pushing Hosoda to develop his own distinct style rather than working within Ghibli's established aesthetic, proving that sometimes career setbacks enable greater achievements than success on someone else's terms would allow. Hosoda's post-Ghibli films demonstrate style, emphasizing digital integration, contemporary settings, and family dynamics that contrast with Miyazaki's hand-drawn fantasy worlds, showing how different directors can coexist within anime rather than competing for single definition of what anime should be. The Ghibli rejection story reminds us that creative industries often require failure and rejection before success, that being denied desired opportunities sometimes pushes artists toward their true calling they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Fact 59. Studio Chizu was founded in 2011 by Hosoda and producer Yuichiro Saito, creating an independent production company that would give Hosoda complete creative control over his films without studio interference or committee decision-making. The studio's name means Map Studio, reflecting Hosoda's desire to chart his own course through anime industry rather than following established paths or accepting studio systems' creative limitations. Studio Chizu's relatively small size allows Hosoda to maintain hands-on involvement with every aspect of production, from storyboarding to final editing, ensuring his vision remains intact throughout the collaborative animation process. The studio's success demonstrates that anime industry, despite consolidation around major studios, still permits independent operations where individual directors' visions can flourish without compromise, to commercial pressures demanding formulaic crowd-pleasing elements over artistic authenticity and personal expression. Fact 60. Hosoda's recurring themes include family, biological, and chosen, and how technology mediates human relationships in contemporary Japan, where digital and physical lives increasingly overlap and blur. His films consistently feature characters navigating between two worlds, whether fantasy and reality or online and offline, exploring how people maintain authentic selves while inhabiting multiple spaces with different rules and social expectations. The family emphasis stems from Hosoda's belief that anime should explore relatable emotional experiences rather than just escapist fantasy. That animation's possibilities work best when grounded in genuine human relationships and conflicts audiences recognize from their own lives. His technological interests reflect growing up in Japan during rapid digital transformation, witnessing how internet and mobile devices changed communication, identity, and community in ways both liberating and alienating, creating new possibilities for connection while introducing new forms of isolation. Fact 61. Mind Game released in 2004 as Masaki Yuasa's debut film, featuring experimental animation that constantly shifts styles from realistic to abstract to photographic collage, creating kaleidoscopic visual experience unlike any previous anime. The film follows Slacker who dies, meets God, gets second chance, and embarks on surreal adventure involving Yakuza, a whale's stomach, and philosophical conversations about living authentically versus accepting mediocrity. Mind Game's animation incorporates live-action footage, photographs, CGI, rotoscoping, and every conceivable technique, with visual style matching the story's themes about embracing life's chaos and possibility, rather than settling for comfortable predictability. The film earned cult following despite limited theatrical release, establishing Yuasa as director willing to completely abandon conventional anime aesthetics in pursuit of perfect marriage between visual style and thematic content, showing that animation's only limit is creators' imagination and courage. Fact 62. Flew Over the Wall released in 2017 as Yuasa's musical, about lonely teenager who befriends a Ningyo Japanese fish person whose singing and dancing awaken the town's repressed joy, despite prejudice against these mythological creatures. The film celebrates creativity and difference, suggesting that art and expression matter more than conforming to social expectations, that communities thrive when they embrace rather than exile those who don't fit prescribed norms. Lu's animation style features fluid, loose character movement that emphasizes joy and energy over realistic anatomy, with musical sequences exploding into abstract color and motion that captures music's emotional impact rather than depicting it literally. The film's themes about prejudice, xenophobia, and mob mentality reflected contemporary Japanese social tensions, using fantasy to explore how communities scapegoat outsiders during times of change or fear, making children's film appearing surface conceal sophisticated social commentary. Fact 63. Night is Short, Walk On Girl, released in 2017 as Yuasa's adaptation of novel following female college students' increasingly surreal night across Kyoto, encountering strange characters while unaware that male student is stalking her with romantic intentions. The film's visual style matches the night's dreamlike progression, with backgrounds becoming increasingly abstract and character designs loosening into caricature as reality's boundaries dissolve through alcohol and escalating absurdity. Yuasa uses the single night structure to compress entire relationships' emotional arc, showing how connection happens through accumulated small encounters rather than dramatic declarations, that love emerges from simply being present in someone's orbit consistently. The film celebrates youth, spontaneity, and Kyoto's atmosphere, while gently mocking the male protagonist's elaborate schemes to orchestrate chance meetings, suggesting authentic connection requires honesty rather than manipulation disguised as fate. Fact 64. Ride Your Wave. Released in 2019 as Yuasa's romance about surfer whose firefighter boyfriend drowns, then begins appearing in water to communicate with her, creating magical realism ghost story about grief, dependency, and learning to continue living after loss. The film uses surfing and water as central metaphors for navigating life's unpredictability, with the protagonist learning that she must ride waves rather than trying to control them, accepting that some forces are beyond human management or understanding. Yuasa's animation makes water a character itself, with fluid sequences capturing both surfing's exhilaration and ocean's deadly power, showing water as simultaneously life-giving and life-taking force that embodies the film's themes about accepting reality's duality. The film addresses how grief makes us see the deceased everywhere, how brain creates comforting hallucinations when reality becomes unbearable, ultimately arguing that letting go of impossible wishes to bring back the dead enables honoring them by living fully as they would want. Fact 65. Devilman Crybaby's success as Netflix series in 2018 raised Yuasa's international profile, with the adaptation's extreme violence and sexual content demonstrating anime's capacity for mature storytelling through his distinctive visual style and psychological depth. The series influenced his subsequent films by proving international audiences would embrace his unconventional aesthetics and challenging narratives, encouraging him to continue pushing boundaries rather than compromising his vision for broader appeal. Yuasa's television work and films inform each other, with techniques developed in series appearing in films and vice versa, creating body of work that feels coherent despite varying in tone, from whimsical to horrific depending on source material. His success demonstrates that auteur directors can maintain consistent artistic vision across different formats and genres. That distinctive style transcends medium-specific conventions when director possesses clear aesthetic philosophy and refuses to compromise personal vision for commercial convenience. Fact 66. Yuasa's unique character designs prioritize expressiveness over anatomical accuracy, with characters squashing, stretching, and distorting in ways that capture emotional states more effectively than realistic proportions could, making his work instantly recognizable among anime's varied aesthetics. His willingness to abandon model sheets when animation demands it means characters can look different between scenes if that difference better conveys their feelings or the moment's energy, treating consistency as less important than emotional truth. Yuasa rejects anime's typical emphasis on attractive character designs, instead creating faces and bodies that are interesting, memorable, and suited to stories being told regardless of whether they conform to conventional beauty standards or appeal to merchandising departments. His aesthetic philosophy argues that animation's greatest strength is freedom from reality's constraints, that attempting to make animation realistic wastes the medium's potential to depict impossible things that capture emotional and psychological truths beyond what live-action photography can achieve. Fact 67. End of Evangelion, released in 1997 as Hideaki Anno's response to the television series' controversial abstract ending, providing apocalyptic conclusion featuring the third impact that merges all human consciousness into single entity. The film's extreme violence and graphic imagery shocked audiences, expecting more typical mecha action, with Anno deliberately creating disturbing content to confront viewers who sent him death threats, demanding happier conclusion to the series. End of Evangelion's psychoanalytic themes about ego boundaries, depression, and the desire to escape consciousness into undifferentiated union became central to understanding Evangelion's lasting impact on anime and otaku culture. The film's final scene showing protagonists Shinji and Asuka on post-apocalyptic beach after rejecting instrumentality leaves their relationship ambiguous, with Anno refusing to provide comfortable resolution to story about characters too damaged for conventional happiness, making ending feel honest, even if unsatisfying to those seeking closure. Fact 68. Rebuild of Evangelion comprises 4 films released between 2007 and 2021, with Anno revisiting his most famous work to provide new ending while updating animation and exploring different thematic directions. The rebuild films initially recap the series before diverging dramatically into alternate timeline where events unfold differently, suggesting Anno was reconsidering the story's meaning and his own relationship with work that defined his career. The final film, Thrice Upon a Time, provides more hopeful conclusion than End of Evangelion, with Anno apparently making peace with his creation and allowing characters to move beyond trauma rather than being destroyed by it. The 14-year production period between first and final rebuild films mirrors Anno's own personal growth and changing perspective on the themes he explored as angry young director versus how he understood them as older, perhaps mellower artist. Fact 69. Thrice Upon a Time released in 2021 as Anno's farewell to Evangelion, providing closure that the franchise's previous endings deliberately withheld, allowing characters and creator to finally move beyond the story that defined them. The film's themes about growing up, accepting adulthood's responsibilities, and finding meaning beyond escapist fantasy felt like Anno speaking directly to fans who remained obsessed with Evangelion decades after its creation. The ending validates Shinji's choice to live in reality rather than fantasy, to accept pain and uncertainty as necessary parts of existence, rather than retreating into fiction or artificial comfort, making meta-commentary about anime fandom itself. Thrice Upon a Time represents rare case of creator successfully concluding franchise without betraying its themes or disappointing fans, achieving nearly impossible balance between honoring what made original special while allowing evolution and growth, rather than simply repeating past glories. Fact 70. Evangelion's impact on mecha genre cannot be overstated, with the series deconstructing super robot tropes by making pilots traumatized children rather than heroic adults, showing war's psychological cost rather than glorifying combat. The franchise influenced entire generation of anime creators who either imitated Evangelion's psychological approach or deliberately rejected it, with the series becoming an unavoidable reference point that all subsequent mecha anime define themselves against or alongside. Evangelion's commercial success, despite or because of its psychological complexity, proved that anime audiences would embrace challenging narratives, encouraging studios to greenlight more experimental and thematically sophisticated projects rather than only producing safe, formulaic content. The franchise's merchandise success demonstrated that narrative darkness and character suffering could coexist with commercial viability, that fans would buy figures and products celebrating deeply flawed, depressed characters as readily as idealized heroes. Fact 71. Evangelion's psychological deconstruction extended beyond mecha genre to influence anime broadly, with Anno's willingness to depict depression, anxiety, and trauma in adolescent characters, opening space for more honest portrayals of mental illness. The series normalized discussing psychological concepts in anime, with terms like Hedgehog's Dilemma and Freudian psychology entering mainstream anime discourse rather than remaining limited to academic or medical contexts. Evangelion's influence appears in countless subsequent anime featuring psychologically complex protagonists struggling with mental health rather than just external obstacles, demonstrating that Anno's work changed what kinds of stories anime could tell and what emotional depths it could explore. The franchise proved that commercial anime could be intellectually and emotionally demanding without alienating audiences, that viewers appreciated being challenged rather than just entertained, that animation could achieve the same psychological sophistication as prestigious live-action drama while utilizing aesthetic possibilities unique to the medium. Fact 72. Dragon Ball Super. Broly released in 2018 as highest quality Dragon Ball film, featuring spectacular animation that elevated franchise beyond its television roots into cinematic spectacle. The film retconned Broly from non-canon villain into sympathetic character with tragic backstory, demonstrating franchise's willingness to revise and improve even beloved elements. The success showed that long-running shonen franchises could produce films appealing to both longtime fans and newcomers, balancing nostalgia with accessibility rather than requiring encyclopedic knowledge. Dragon Ball Super. Broly proved that shonen films could prioritize animation quality and storytelling craft, rather than existing solely as extended episodes for devoted fans, raising expectations for what franchise films could achieve artistically. Fact 73. One Piece film. Red released in 2022 as highest-grossing One Piece film, focusing on pop star revealed to be Shanks' daughter, using music and emotion to broaden franchise's appeal beyond typical action fans. The film's emphasis on female character story rather than Luffy's typical adventures showed franchise's confidence in expanding beyond established formula without alienating core audience who watch for Straw Hat. Pirates' adventures. Film Red's musical elements and emotional storytelling attracted viewers who typically avoided shonen anime, demonstrating that franchise films could experiment with genre and tone while maintaining enough familiar elements to satisfy longtime fans. The commercial success proved that One Piece could compete with Studio Ghibli and Makoto Shinkai films at Japanese box office, that shonen franchises had evolved beyond niche products into genuine mainstream cultural phenomena. Fact 74. My Hero Academia movies demonstrate how franchise films can explore themes and character dynamics that the series' ongoing plot cannot accommodate, using film's standalone nature to experiment with darker scenarios or altered power dynamics. The films feature original villains designed specifically for movie format, allowing 2-hour contained narratives rather than arcs, requiring multiple episodes to resolve. Showing films can complement series rather than just recapping it. My Hero Academia's films earned critical praise for animation quality exceeding the TV series, proving that movies provide opportunity to showcase what franchises can achieve with theatrical budgets and production schedules, allowing greater detail. The films demonstrate that superhero anime can produce crowd-pleasing blockbusters comparable to Marvel films while maintaining anime's distinct aesthetic and storytelling approaches rather than simply imitating Western superhero media. Fact 75. Demon Slayer. Mugen Train. Released in 2020 as direct continuation of TV series, becoming highest-grossing Japanese film ever by earning over $500 million globally despite pandemic limiting theatrical releases. The film's unprecedented success came from perfect timing, filling the void when other blockbusters were delayed, combined with the series' massive popularity and audiences' desperate desire for communal entertainment after months of isolation. Mugen Train's record-breaking performance demonstrated anime's commercial power, that anime films could achieve Avatar or Avengers-level box office numbers when circumstances aligned and quality met massive existing fan bases' expectations. The film's success shocked even the anime industry, proving that anime had evolved from niche interest into genuine mainstream entertainment, competing with Hollywood blockbusters on equal footing financially, if not yet culturally, in Western markets. Fact 76. Naruto movies expanded the franchise's canon through original storylines, exploring characters' backstories or hypothetical scenarios, with some films later influencing the manga's direction by introducing concepts that the original creator incorporated into main narrative. The films demonstrate how franchise movies can exist in ambiguous canon status, being official without requiring integration into main story, allowing fans to accept or ignore them as personal preference dictates. Naruto's films evolved from simple action spectacles into more emotionally complex narratives as franchise matured, reflecting series' own tonal shift from energetic ninja adventures to darker examinations of war, trauma, and cyclical violence. The franchise's film success helped sustain Naruto's commercial viability during manga gaps and after series conclusion, proving that beloved franchises could continue earning through theatrical releases even after original narrative ended. Fact 77. Bleach returned with new film in 2018 after years of dormancy, demonstrating that shonen franchises never truly die but can be revived when market conditions favor their return, and nostalgia makes audiences receptive. The film served as proof of concept that interest remained despite the anime series' cancellation years earlier, eventually leading to anime's return to adapt the manga's final arc that had never been animated. Bleach's revival demonstrated that anime studios view major franchises as long-term assets rather than limited-duration properties, that ended franchises remain potentially profitable if enough time passes for nostalgia and new audience discovery. The franchise's return showed that anime industry increasingly operates on Hollywood's model of indefinitely extending valuable intellectual properties rather than allowing them to conclude definitively and permanently. Fact 78. Jujutsu Kaisen 0, released in 2021 as prequel film, adapting the manga's prequel volume, introducing protagonist's predecessor and establishing backstory for characters and conflicts that the main series referenced but never fully explained. The film's success proved that prequels could work for anime franchises when they provided meaningful context rather than just existing to capitalize on current popularity without offering substantive additions to narrative or characters. Jujutsu Kaisen 0 demonstrated that relatively new franchises could produce successful films quickly if the source material provided appropriate content and studio committed sufficient resources to ensure theatrical quality. The film's international success showed that anime films could open worldwide simultaneously rather than requiring month-long delays between Japanese and international releases, treating global audiences as equally important rather than as secondary markets receiving delayed products. Fact 79. The difference between TV recap films and original story films creates hierarchy within anime movies, with original content considered more prestigious, while compilations are viewed as cash grabs unless they significantly improve upon the source material through better animation or restructured narratives. Recap films serve important function by making long series accessible to newcomers who lack time to watch hundreds of episodes, essentially serving as extended trailers that introduce worlds and characters before original film content appears. The best recap films like Gundam Trilogy or recent Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen adaptations justify existence by improving animation, adding new scenes, and restructuring narratives more coherently than weekly broadcast schedules allowed. The compilation format's existence acknowledges that anime's serialized nature creates accessibility barriers, with films helping franchises maintain relevance by periodically reintroducing themselves to potential new audiences who discover series through films rather than through hundreds of episodes. Fact 80. Fan service versus storytelling balance represents ongoing tension in franchise films, with studios pressured to include character moments and references pleasing devoted fans, while maintaining narratives accessible and compelling to casual viewers or newcomers. The most successful franchise films achieve balance by grounding fan service in character development or plot, rather than stopping narrative for gratuitous references, making callbacks serve storytelling purposes rather than existing solely for recognition's sake. Films that prioritize fan service over narrative coherence often succeed commercially by satisfying existing fans, but fail to expand franchises' audiences or earn critical respect beyond their established fan bases. The balance question demonstrates ongoing debate about anime films' purpose. Should they primarily serve existing fans who guarantee baseline profits, or should they prioritize broader accessibility, potentially expanding franchises' reach but risking alienating the core audience that sustains commercial viability between releases? Fact 81. Katsuhiro Otomo's work beyond Akira includes directing Steam Boy, an alternate history steampunk epic featuring the most expensive anime production budget at the time, though commercial and critical reception disappointed compared to his landmark debut. Otomo's relative inactivity as director frustrates fans wanting more films from the creator of anime's most influential work, though his perfectionism and desire for complete creative control makes frequent output impossible within anime industry's economic constraints. His influence extends beyond his limited directorial output through manga work and other creative roles, with Akira alone ensuring his legacy as one of anime's most important figures regardless of subsequent productivity. Otomo represents the artist whose first work achieved such perfection that everything afterwards faces impossible expectations, with Akira's shadow making it nearly impossible for subsequent works to receive fair evaluation independent of that masterpiece's influence and iconic status. Fact 82. Mamoru Oshii's philosophical approach emphasizes contemplation over action, with his films featuring long sequences of characters walking, thinking, or simply existing within their environments, without dialogue or plot advancement disrupting meditative atmosphere. His Ghost in the Shell films exemplify this approach, prioritizing philosophical questions about consciousness and identity over the action sequences that typically dominate science fiction, making his adaptations fundamentally different in tone from the source manga. Oshii's work challenges conventional pacing, demanding patience from audiences accustomed to constant narrative momentum, rewarding those willing to sit with silence and stillness rather than requiring perpetual stimulation. His influence on anime directors interested in philosophical science fiction cannot be overstated, with his work demonstrating that anime could achieve the intellectual density and meditative pacing of art cinema without sacrificing the medium's visual possibilities or genre entertainment's pleasures. Fact 83. Sunao Katabuchi's In This Corner of the World, released in 2016, as gentle yet devastating portrayal of civilian life in Hiroshima during World War II, following young woman navigating daily routines and small joys despite escalating privation and tragedy. The film depicts war's mundane horrors, malnutrition, resource scarcity, constant anxiety rather than spectacular combat, showing how conflict destroys ordinary life's fabric through accumulated small losses before the ultimate catastrophe of the atomic bombing. Katabuchi's detailed research brings 1,940 seconds Hiroshima to life with almost documentary precision, recreating the city's geography, fashion, and daily life so meticulously that elderly viewers recognize their vanished world rendered in animation. In This Corner of the World earned critical acclaim and substantial box office success despite its difficult subject matter, proving audiences would embrace historical anime that treated war seriously and humanely rather than either glorifying militarism or exploiting tragedy for cheap emotional manipulation. Fact 84. Naoko Yamada directed Liz and the Blue Bird in 2018 as intimate character study about two high school girls in music club whose intense friendship faces crisis as graduation approaches and their different personalities create diverging futures. The film features minimal dialogue, instead using subtle animation of glances, gestures, and body language to convey the unspoken tensions and desires that the characters cannot articulate even to themselves, requiring viewers to watch carefully and interpret subtext. Yamada's direction emphasizes feet, hands, and indirect gazes rather than typical anime focus on faces, creating visual language that captures adolescent self-consciousness and the difficulty of direct emotional communication. Liz and the Blue Bird represents anime's artistic possibilities at their highest, a film where nearly imperceptible animation details convey profound emotional complexity, demonstrating that anime can achieve psychological subtlety, rivaling any medium when creators possess the vision and skill to trust audiences to perceive and interpret delicate visual storytelling. Fact 85. Mari Okada's directorial debut, Makuya established her as major filmmaker beyond her celebrated screenplay work, with her writing background informing her directing through emphasis on emotional authenticity and character interiority. Okada's willingness to explore female perspectives and experiences that male-dominated anime industry often ignores or mishandles makes her films feel distinct and necessary, providing viewpoints and emotional textures underrepresented in mainstream anime. Her success as director opened doors for other women directors in anime industry that historically limited women to production roles while reserving directing positions for men, making her achievement both artistic and socially significant. Okada's transition from screenwriter to director demonstrates that anime industry slowly evolving to recognize that diverse perspectives behind camera create richer storytelling, that limiting directors to single demographic constrains the range of stories anime can tell and the depths anime can reach. Fact 86. Hiromasa Yonebayashi left Studio Ghibli to co-found Studio Ponok, directing Mary and the Witch's Flower as studio's debut feature, demonstrating Ghibli-style animation could continue even after Miyazaki's retirement and Ghibli's semi-dormancy. The film deliberately echoes Ghibli's aesthetic while developing its own identity, proving that the Ghibli tradition could evolve through artists trained in that style rather than dying with its founders. Mary and the Witch's Flower earned praise for animation quality and whimsical storytelling, while facing inevitable comparisons to Ghibli that made it difficult for the film to establish independent identity beyond being like Ghibli, but not actually Ghibli. Studio Ponok's existence represents both homage to and evolution beyond Ghibli, asking whether that studio's legacy is specific to its founders or represents approach to animation that can be carried forward by new generations of artists committed to hand-drawn quality and humanistic storytelling. Fact 87. Goro Miyazaki's fraught relationship with his father. Hayao created complicated dynamic where the son directed Ghibli films despite lacking his father's genius, with Hayao publicly criticizing Goro's work while the studio needed family succession for business continuity. Goro's films like Tales from Earthsea and From Up on Poppy Hill demonstrate competent craftsmanship without the visionary brilliance that made his father legendary, creating works that feel like Ghibli films without possessing the ineffable magic distinguishing masterpieces from professional products. The father-son dynamic represents broader question about legacy and succession in creative industries, whether genius is inheritable or learnable, whether children of legendary artists should pursue their own paths or attempt to continue their parents' work, whether family succession serves art or just business interests. Goro's position as director, primarily due to family connection rather than demonstrated exceptional talent, raises uncomfortable questions about nepotism in anime industry, though his continued effort to grow as filmmaker earns respect even when results fall short of the impossible standard his surname creates. Fact 88. Hayao Miyazaki's repeated final films demonstrate his inability or unwillingness to retire, with multiple announced retirements followed by returns to directing, suggesting that creative work defines his identity so completely that stopping would mean psychological death. Each supposedly final film, Princess Mononoke, The Wind Rises, How Do You Live, represents Miyazaki attempting to say everything important before death, treating each film as last testament, yet each retirement proves temporary when new ideas demand expression. Miyazaki's inability to stop working frustrates Studio Ghibli staff, who must repeatedly mobilize for productions on aging directors' schedule, though his genius means each return produces works of such quality that the inconvenience seems worthwhile. The repeated retirements raise questions about artists' relationships with their work, whether creative compulsion can be healthily managed or whether it consumes artists entirely, whether rest is possible for those defined by their creations, or whether stopping means ceasing to exist in meaningful sense. Fact 89. The rise of female directors in anime represents slow progress in historically male-dominated industry, with directors like Naoko Yamada, Mari Okada, and others finally receiving opportunities to helm major theatrical productions rather than being limited to episode direction or screenplay work. These directors often bring different sensibilities and interests to their films, exploring emotional textures, relationships, and character perspectives that male directors frequently overlook or mishandle through lack of personal experience or cultural conditioning. The increased representation behind the camera enriches anime's storytelling possibilities, demonstrating that limiting directors to single demographic created artificial constraint on the range of stories anime could tell and the depths of human experience it could explore authentically. Despite progress, women remain dramatically underrepresented among anime directors, with the handful of successful female directors being exceptions that prove the rule of male dominance, rather than indicators that industry has achieved meaningful gender parity in creative leadership positions. Determining what anime gets. made and how stories are told. Fact 90. International directors influenced by anime create interesting feedback loop where anime's global spread inspires filmmakers worldwide who then influence anime in return, with cross-cultural exchange, enriching both anime and international animation through mutual learning and adaptation. Directors from France, America, Korea, and elsewhere cite anime as formative influence on their aesthetic sensibilities and storytelling approaches, with anime's distinctive visual language and willingness to tackle mature themes, expanding their understanding of animation's possibilities. The international influence validates anime as global art form rather than exclusively Japanese cultural product, though debates continue about whether non-Japanese anime-influenced works should be called anime, or whether the term should remain specific to Japanese production, regardless of aesthetic similarities. The cross-pollination demonstrates that artistic movements become international through influence and adaptation, with anime having achieved sufficient cultural penetration that its techniques and approaches now inform global animation vocabulary rather than existing as exotic alternative to Western traditions. Fact 91. Perfect Blue's influence on Black Swan created interesting situation where Aronofsky's acclaimed psychological thriller borrowed heavily from Kahn's anime. Yet many Western viewers remained unaware of the source material that inspired sequences they praised as innovative. The influence demonstrates anime's persistent invisibility problem in Western critical discourse, where anime's innovations get credited to Western filmmakers who adapt them rather than to original creators who developed those techniques first. Aronofsky acknowledged his debt to Perfect Blue and purchased remake rights, showing respect for source material even as his film reached audiences who would never watch anime despite appreciating techniques that anime pioneered. The Perfect Blue-Black Swan connection represents how anime influences global cinema, even when that influence goes unrecognized, with anime serving as innovation laboratory whose experiments get repackaged for mainstream audiences unwilling to engage with animation or subtitled foreign films. Fact 92. Ghost in the Shell's philosophical explorations of consciousness, identity, and technology's impact on humanity, established template for intelligent science fiction anime, proving that action spectacle and deep philosophical inquiry could coexist rather than being mutually exclusive. The film's questions about whether artificial intelligence achieving sufficient complexity deserves rights and recognition as conscious being anticipated contemporary debates about AI ethics by decades, demonstrating anime's capacity for prescient speculation about technological futures. Ghost in the Shell's influence on The Matrix created situation where its philosophical ideas reached massive mainstream audience through Hollywood adaptation, though The Matrix simplified and westernized concepts that Ghost in the Shell explored with greater nuance and ambiguity. The film represents anime at its most intellectually ambitious, refusing to provide easy answers to questions about consciousness and identity, instead presenting scenarios that force viewers to examine their assumptions about what makes someone truly alive and whether biological substrate is necessary requirement for consciousness. Fact 93. Memories anthology film released in 1995, featuring 3 short films, Magnetic Rose, Stink Bomb, and Cannon Fodder, each directed by different filmmaker with distinct visual style and thematic concerns, demonstrating anime's versatility and range within single release. The anthology format allowed experimentation that full-length features couldn't risk, with each segment exploring different genre and aesthetic approach without requiring commercial viability of feature-length narrative. Katsuhiro Otomo, produced the anthology and directed Cannon Fodder, using the format to showcase different directors' talents while maintaining overall cohesive vision about technology's impact on humanity and memory's unreliability. The anthology's success proved that anime audiences would embrace experimental formats and challenging narratives if the filmmaking quality was sufficiently high, encouraging studios to occasionally take risks on unconventional projects rather than only producing safe, formulaic features designed to maximize commercial returns through lowest common denominator appeal. And so we reach the end of this second part of our journey through anime cinema, having explored the visionary directors who pushed animation's boundaries, Satoshi Kon's reality-bending psychological thrillers, Mamoru Hosoda's family-focused fantasies, Masaki Yuasa's experimental visual chaos, and the Evangelion franchise that deconstructed and reconstructed mecha anime while traumatizing a generation. We have witnessed how shonen franchises evolved from simple extended episodes into genuine theatrical experiences, how anthology formats and experimental films proved anime's range, and how female directors slowly gained recognition in male-dominated industry, bringing new perspectives and emotional depths to anime's storytelling possibilities. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine yourself moving through these various directors' distinct visual worlds, Kon's seamless transitions between reality and dream, Hosoda's warm family gatherings in fantastical digital spaces, Yuasa's fluid characters dancing through impossible geometries, the Evangelion pilots' desperate battles against angels and their own psychological demons. These filmmakers have shown us that anime contains multitudes, that the medium accommodates infinite approaches from psychological realism to surreal abstraction, from intimate character studies to apocalyptic spectacles, from gentle family dramas to violent deconstructions of genre conventions. Rest peacefully knowing that anime cinema continues evolving through directors who refuse to accept limitations on what animation can achieve or what stories it can tell. Tomorrow we complete our journey by exploring anime's music, its global impact, the techniques that make it possible, and the themes that give these beautiful films their emotional and philosophical weight. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with all the impossible things that anime makes, possible cities that fold, bodies that transform, time that bends, and emotions rendered visible through light, color, and movement that only animation can achieve. Good night, and may you wake refreshed to appreciate how these artists have expanded not just animation but cinema itself, proving that drawn lines and painted backgrounds can move us as deeply as any photograph of reality. Fact 94. Joe Hisaishi's partnership with Hayao Miyazaki spans decades and dozens of films, creating musical language inseparable from Studio Ghibli's emotional impact and worldwide recognition. Hisaishi's scores blend European classical influences with Japanese folk melodies, creating soundscapes that feel simultaneously universal and distinctly Japanese in their emotional textures. His piano-based compositions for films like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle have become concert hall staples, with orchestras worldwide performing Ghibli suites to sold-out audiences. The Miyazaki-Hisaishi collaboration represents one of cinema's great director-composer partnerships, comparable to Spielberg-Williams or Burton-Elfman, with each artist elevating the other's work beyond what either could achieve alone. Fact 95. Your Name's Radwimp's soundtrack became cultural phenomenon in Japan, with the band's rock songs becoming as famous as the film itself and dominating music charts for months. The integration of vocal songs into the narrative rather than just as credits music gave Your Name distinctive musical identity that separated it from typical anime scores. Radwimp's music, captured adolescent longing and intensity perfectly, with lyrics about connection across impossible distances resonating with audiences experiencing similar feelings in their own lives. The soundtrack's commercial success demonstrated that anime film music could achieve mainstream popularity beyond just being background to beloved scenes, becoming independent cultural artifacts that people engaged with separately from the films. Fact 96. A silent voice's use of silence and sound design creates powerful emotional effects, with director Naoko Yamada using audio to represent the deaf protagonist's experience and the hearing protagonist's guilt. The film features extended sequences without music, where ambient sound carries emotional weight, demonstrating that absence of score can be as powerful as its presence when used intentionally. Yamada's decision to mute audio during certain emotional moments forces viewers to focus on visual storytelling and animation, creating immersive experience that approximates deafness without literal silence. The film's sound design earned praise for sensitive handling of disability representation, avoiding both patronizing depictions and exploitation of disability for emotional manipulation. Fact 97. Classical music in anime. Films from Beethoven in Evangelion to Wagner in various mecha series demonstrates how anime borrows from Western musical traditions while recontextualizing them. The use of existing classical pieces rather than original scores sometimes stems from budget constraints, though it also creates intellectual and emotional connections that original music couldn't achieve. Evangelion's use of Ode to Joy during apocalyptic scenes creates disturbing irony, turning celebration of human brotherhood into soundtrack for humanity's annihilation through instrumentality. These musical choices demonstrate anime's sophisticated engagement with Western culture, appropriating and reinterpreting classical music in ways that create new meanings distinct from original contexts and intentions. Fact 98. Voice acting versus singing performances creates interesting casting challenges when anime films feature musical elements, requiring directors to choose between actors who can sing or singers who can act. Some films, like Belle, use separate performers for speaking and singing roles, allowing optimal performance in each mode while requiring careful integration to maintain character coherence. The emphasis on voice acting quality in Japanese anime exceeds typical Western animation dubbing standards, with seiyuu being celebrities whose voices are as recognizable as their faces. Musical anime films have elevated voice actors' singing abilities as important skill, with some seiyuu becoming successful recording artists independent of their animation work through character songs and original albums. Fact 99. Theme songs becoming hits beyond their films demonstrates anime music's cultural penetration in Japan, where opening and ending songs often chart independently and become karaoke standards. These songs create lasting associations between music and visual memories, with hearing the song instantly recalling the film's emotional high points even years later. The commercial music industry's integration with anime creates symbiotic relationship where record labels promote films and films promote music, with theme songs serving as advertising that audiences willingly consume. Western anime releases often replace Japanese themes with English songs or generic orchestral music, assuming Western audiences won't appreciate Japanese pop music, though recent releases increasingly preserve original soundtracks, recognizing that music is integral to the complete artistic vision. Fact 100. Orchestra concerts dedicated to anime films, like Joe Hisaishi's Ghibli performances or Yoko Kanno's various project concerts, demonstrate anime music's legitimacy in classical music spaces, traditionally dismissive of popular entertainment. These concerts sell out major venues worldwide, with audiences spanning generations and cultural backgrounds united by love for music that first moved them while watching animated films. The concert phenomenon validates anime composers as serious musicians whose work deserves recognition alongside traditional film composers, breaking down artificial hierarchies separating serious classical music from supposedly lesser popular entertainment. The visual elements often incorporated into these concerts through projected clips or synchronized animation create multimedia experiences that honor the music's original context while allowing it to exist independently as concert. All performance. Fact 101. Yoko Kanno's experimental scores for films like Wolf Children blend genres freely, incorporating jazz, electronic, classical, and world music elements to create soundscapes that defy categorization or convention. Kanno's willingness to experiment with unusual instrumentation and musical structures pushes anime music beyond orchestral scores toward truly innovative sound design that matches animation's visual possibilities. Her work demonstrates that anime music need not follow Hollywood scoring conventions, that animation's freedom from realistic constraints extends to audio design where impossible sounds can accompany impossible images. Kanno's influence on anime music encourages composers to view scores as creative opportunities rather than formulas to execute, making music an equal creative partner to animation rather than subordinate element supporting visuals. Fact 102. The importance of sound design beyond music includes how footsteps, ambient noise, and environmental sounds create believable worlds, even in fantastical settings requiring sounds that don't exist in reality. Foley artists working on anime films must create sounds for everything from Totoro's roar to Titan footsteps to magical transformations, inventing audio that feels right even when no reference exists. The distinction between sound effects and music blurs in anime films, where composers integrate environmental sounds into musical textures, creating cohesive sonic landscapes where music and sound design complement rather than compete. The attention to sound design in theatrical anime releases exceeds television anime's capabilities, with films using dynamic range and spatial audio to create immersive experiences that justify theatrical viewing beyond just seeing bigger screen. Fact 103. How music guides emotion in anime demonstrates composers' power to shape audience response, with scoring choices directing viewers toward intended emotional interpretations of ambiguous scenes. Music can make identical footage feel tragic, triumphant, ominous, or peaceful depending on composers' choices, demonstrating that emotion in film results from interaction between image and sound. Anime composers often work closely with directors during storyboarding rather than scoring finished animation, allowing music to influence animation timing and pacing from early production stages. This integration creates tighter synchronization between audio and visual than typical film scoring, where music gets added after picture lock, making anime music feel more organic and essential rather than supplementary. Fact 104. Hand-drawn versus CGI integration represents ongoing negotiation in anime between traditional techniques and technological possibilities, with most contemporary anime films blending both approaches rather than choosing exclusively. Hand-drawn character animation often appears against CGI backgrounds or alongside CGI effects, creating hybrid aesthetic that leverages each technique's strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. The resistance to full CGI among many anime fans stems from belief that hand-drawn animation possesses warmth and humanity that computer-generated imagery lacks despite its technical precision. Films like Demon Slayer, Mugen Train demonstrate sophisticated CGI integration, where digital and traditional animation blend seamlessly, making technique invisible in service of storytelling rather than being obvious or distracting through mismatched aesthetics. Fact 105. Sakuga moments of exceptional animation quality within films create memorable sequences that anime fans celebrate and analyze, with specific animators' work becoming identifiable through distinctive styles and techniques. These peak animation moments often feature in action sequences or emotional climaxes where increased detail and fluidity maximizes impact, demonstrating what animation can achieve when time and budget allow perfectionism. Sakuga appreciation has created subculture of animation experts who can identify which animator worked on specific cuts based on stylistic signatures, treating animation as authorial medium where individual artists' contributions are recognizable. The focus on Sakuga moments acknowledges that maintaining theatrical quality animation for entire films is economically impossible. Accepting that strategic deployment of exceptional animation creates greater impact than uniform mediocrity would achieve. Fact 106. Key animators as celebrities in Japan reflects how anime culture recognizes individual artists' contributions rather than treating animation as anonymous industrial product emerging from corporate studios. Animators like Toshiyuki Inoue, Yutaka Nakamura, or Mitsuo Iso have devoted followings who track their work across projects, appreciating their distinctive approaches to movement, timing, and expression. This recognition validates animation as art form where individual creators matter, pushing against industrial model where animators are interchangeable workers rather than artists with unique visions. The celebrity status of top animators incentivizes young artists to develop distinctive styles rather than just competently executing house styles, enriching anime's visual diversity through multiple competing aesthetic approaches. Fact 107. Background art as character in anime films, from Ghibli's painterly landscapes to Shinkai's photorealistic cities, demonstrates how environments convey emotion and meaning beyond just being where characters exist. The extreme detail and beauty of anime backgrounds creates contemplative moments where viewers simply appreciate environment's aesthetic qualities without narrative advancement, treating scenery as worthy of attention. Background artists like Kazuo Oga or Makoto Shinkai himself, before directing full-time, create environments so evocative that they become reason to watch films regardless of story or character quality. The emphasis on background art distinguishes anime from Western animation's typical focus on characters, with anime treating space and place as essential storytelling elements, deserving equal attention to figures moving through them. Fact 108. Rotoscoping techniques, where animators trace live-action footage, create realistic movement that hand-drawn animation alone cannot achieve. Though debates continue about whether rotoscoping is cheating or legitimate tool, films like Aku no Hana used rotoscoping extensively, creating unsettling realism that divided audiences between those appreciating the technique and those finding it disturbing or lazy. The technique allows realistic human movement without needing exceptional animation skills, making complex motion accessible but risking losing animation's expressive exaggeration that makes characters more emotionally engaging than reality. Rotoscoping's appropriate use remains contentious, with consensus being that it works best when integrated with traditional animation, rather than being exclusive technique replacing hand-drawn work entirely. Fact 109. Limited animation versus full animation distinguishes anime's economical approach from Disney's expensive fluidity, with anime traditionally using fewer frames per second and strategic still frames to reduce costs. This limitation forced creativity in depicting motion and emotion through editing and composition rather than smooth movement, developing aesthetic where stillness and dynamic camera movement compensate for animation limitations. Some argue limited animation is not limitation, but rather distinctive stylistic choice that creates different aesthetic values than Western full animation, with each approach offering different strengths and possibilities. Contemporary anime films generally afford more full animation than television series, while still employing strategic limited animation, where extreme fluidity isn't necessary for impact or comprehension. Fact 110. Computer assistance while maintaining hand-drawn feel represents contemporary anime's hybrid approach, using digital tools for coloring, compositing, and certain effects while keeping character animation traditionally drawn. Digital ink and paint replaced cells in the early 2000s, allowing cleaner lines and easier corrections while eliminating physical materials costs and environmental impact from chemical processing. The digital workflow allows iterating faster and making changes later in production than cell animation permitted, though some artists mourn the tactile quality and subtle imperfections that hand-painted cells provided. The transition to digital tools democratized anime production by reducing costs and physical space requirements, though it also created new challenges around file management, digital archiving, and maintaining skills in traditional techniques as fewer artists train in pre-digital methods. Fact 111. The anime style versus realistic movement reflects aesthetic choice, prioritizing readability and emotional impact over naturalistic motion, with poses held longer and movements emphasized more than real human motion exhibits. Anime characters often move in exaggerated ways that communicate energy and emotion more clearly than subtle realistic motion would allow, accepting unrealism as valid approach to conveying psychological states visually. The style's distinctive characteristics include limited in-between frames, dynamic speed lines, exaggerated impact frames, and held dramatic poses that create rhythm and emphasis impossible in realistic animation. Western criticisms of anime style as crude or cheap miss how these techniques serve aesthetic and practical purposes, creating visual language as valid as any other animation approach, even when it violates realistic movement principles. Fact 112. Water and light as signature challenges that animators use to demonstrate technical skill appear as showcases in many anime films, with elaborate water effects or lighting becoming proof of production quality. The difficulty of animating water's translucency, reflection, and flowing movement makes it popular choice for demonstrating technical mastery and justifying theatrical production budgets exceeding television standards. Light effects from lens flares to sunbeams filtering through trees create atmosphere and beauty while showcasing attention to detail and understanding of how light behaves physically. These elements demonstrate that anime directors and animators understand they're creating visual art where aesthetic beauty justifies existence as much as narrative content, treating each frame as potential still image worthy of artistic appreciation. Fact 113. Food animation in anime films, from Ghibli's loving depictions of meals to Your Name's detailed convenience store offerings, demonstrates anime's attention to everyday objects and rituals. The extreme detail and appetizing appearance of animated food has spawned entire genre of cooking anime and restaurants recreating fictional dishes, demonstrating animation's power to make even mundane objects desirable. Food's prominence in anime reflects Japanese cultural importance placed on cuisine and communal eating, with meals serving as bonding moments and visual shorthand for care, comfort, and cultural identity. The animation of eating sounds and character reactions to food creates sensory experience beyond visual, with voice acting and sound design making viewers almost taste what characters consume through multisensory storytelling. Fact 114. How long feature films take to produce varies wildly from 2 years for efficient productions to 8+ years for ambitious works like Princess Kaguya, with production length depending on complexity, budget, and perfectionism. Studio Ghibli's features typically required 3 to 5 years, with Miyazaki personally overseeing and correcting thousands of frames, while faster productions sacrifice detail and ambition for quicker turnaround. The long production times make anime films risky investments, since trends and audience interests may shift before completion, requiring faith in timeless storytelling over chasing temporary popularity. The extended timelines also mean directors age significantly between films, with some creators producing only a handful of features across entire careers due to time and resources each film demands. Fact 115. Budget differences between TV and film animation allow theatrical releases to afford detail levels and animation quality that weekly broadcast schedules cannot match, justifying theatrical viewing beyond larger screens. Film budgets enable hiring more animators for longer periods, allowing scenes to be refined and polished to standards that television's tight deadlines prevent, even when creative teams possess equal skill. The budget disparity creates hierarchy where films are considered more prestigious than series, though some argue that series' extended runtime allows deeper character development and more complex storytelling than films' constrained length permits. The financial stakes of theatrical releases encourage conservative storytelling choices sometimes, with studios nervous about experimental narratives when millions are invested compared to television's lower per-episode costs, allowing more risk-taking paradoxically. Fact 116. Anime films at Cannes, Berlin, and Venice film festivals gaining recognition at prestigious European festivals validates anime as serious cinema, deserving critical attention alongside live-action art house films. Ghost in the Shell's influence on festival programmers opened doors for anime being included in competition rather than relegated to genre sidebars or children's programming categories. The festival circuit provides alternative distribution path for experimental anime films that lack commercial appeal but deserve recognition for artistic innovation and risk-taking. Festival success creates critical prestige, helping anime overcome Western prejudices about animation being children's medium, with awards and festival selections providing credibility that pure commercial success cannot confer. Fact 117. International box office growth demonstrates anime's expanding reach beyond Japan, with films like Your Name and Demon Slayer earning hundreds of millions worldwide, rather than being limited to Japanese domestic markets. China has become a crucial market for anime films, sometimes exceeding Japanese box office returns, though censorship and political tensions create uncertainties about long-term reliability and access. Western theatrical releases have expanded from limited art house showings to wide releases in multiplexes, indicating mainstream acceptance and distributor confidence in commercial viability beyond niche anime fan audience. The international expansion validates anime as global entertainment competing with Hollywood, rather than exotic Japanese product appealing only to specialized audiences. Fact 118. Netflix and streaming changing distribution allows anime films to reach global audiences simultaneously without theatrical delays or limited releases, democratizing access while potentially reducing theatrical revenues. The streaming model enables niche films that wouldn't justify theatrical distribution to find audiences worldwide, with recommendation algorithms exposing viewers to films they'd never discover through traditional distribution channels. Some worry streaming devalues anime by making it disposable content consumed casually at home rather than special theatrical event, though streaming's convenience and accessibility benefits outweigh concerns about lost theatrical experience. The pandemic accelerated streaming's importance when theaters closed, with films like Evangelion 3, 0+1 achieving global impact through Amazon Prime distribution that might not have occurred through traditional theatrical rollout. Fact 119. Fan subtitling communities historically made anime accessible to Western audiences years before official releases, with passionate volunteers translating films and series that companies ignored or released incompletely. These unofficial translations occupied legal gray area where they technically violated copyright while simultaneously building Western audience for anime that eventually justified official licensing and distribution. The translation work required linguistic skill and cultural knowledge to convey Japanese-specific concepts and wordplay in English, with debates continuing about localization versus literal translation and which approach better serves non-Japanese audiences. Official streaming has reduced fan subtitling's necessity, while professional translations sometimes disappoint, fans preferring community translations' attention to nuance and cultural context over official releases to simplified localization aiming for broader accessibility. Fact 120. Anime-inspiring Western animators appears in works from Avatar, The Last Airbender to Spider-Verse's stylistic choices, with anime's influence now permeating global animation, regardless of production origin. Western creators who grew up watching anime incorporate its techniques and aesthetics into their work, creating hybrid styles that blend anime's visual language with Western storytelling sensibilities. The influence raises ongoing debates about cultural appropriation versus appreciation, whether Western anime-influenced works should be called anime, or whether the term should remain exclusively Japanese, regardless of stylistic similarities. The cross-pollination demonstrates animation as global medium where techniques and aesthetics circulate freely, with anime's influence on Western animation being most visible example of how creative movements transcend national boundaries through inspiration and adaptation. Fact 121. Academic studies of anime films, treating them as legitimate subjects for scholarly analysis, appears in film studies programs and Japanese studies departments worldwide, validating anime as worthy of serious critical attention. Scholars analyze anime's cultural significance, aesthetic innovations, and representations of gender, technology, and Japanese identity, producing academic discourse that elevates anime beyond popular entertainment into cultural artifact, deserving rigorous examination. The academic attention helps combat Western dismissal of anime as children's cartoons or low culture, though some fans resist academic analysis as destroying spontaneous enjoyment through overinterpretation and jargon. The scholarly interest demonstrates anime's cultural importance, extending beyond entertainment into realms of national identity, technological anxiety, and global cultural exchange. Fact 122. Museum exhibitions worldwide featuring anime art, from original cells to concept drawings to immersive installations, demonstrate anime's recognition as fine art, deserving institutional validation and preservation. Major museums from MoMA to Tokyo's Mori Museum have hosted anime exhibitions, treating animation art as equivalent to painting or sculpture in aesthetic value and cultural significance. These exhibitions make anime accessible to audiences who might never watch the films, introducing artwork to fine art contexts that reframe how viewers understand animation's artistic processes and achievements. The institutional recognition through museum exhibitions validates decades of fan arguments that anime deserves recognition as serious art form, with museums' curatorial decisions lending authority that fan enthusiasm alone couldn't provide. Fact 123. Anime tourism in Japan allows fans to visit locations depicted in films, with local governments sometimes promoting sites featured in popular anime to attract tourists and boost economies. Films like Your Name created pilgrimage spots, where fans recreate iconic scenes through photography, with local businesses benefiting from anime-motivated tourism to otherwise ordinary locations. The tourism phenomenon demonstrates anime's impact on physical spaces and local economies, with fictional locations becoming real destinations through fans' desire to visit worlds that moved them emotionally. Some worry this commodifies art into marketing tool, while others celebrate how it connects fiction to reality, giving fans tangible connection to stories that exist primarily as light and color on screens. Fact 124. Cosplay culture from movie characters allows fans to embody beloved characters physically, creating performative engagement with anime beyond passive viewership through costume creation and character performance. Major conventions feature cosplay competitions where elaborate costumes demonstrate craftsmanship and passion, with participants spending hundreds of hours and significant money recreating animated designs and physical materials. The cosplay community's international scope demonstrates anime's global reach, with fans worldwide engaging with same characters despite linguistic and cultural barriers that might prevent them from fully understanding original Japanese content. Cosplay represents active fandom where consumers become creators, transforming passive media consumption into participatory culture, where fans contribute their own creative labor to celebrating works they love. Fact 125. How anime changed perception of animation as just for kids in Western markets, historically dismissive of animation's potential for mature storytelling and thematic sophistication. Anime's willingness to tackle complex themes, depict graphic violence, and explore adult sexuality demonstrated that animation could address any subject live action could, challenging Western assumptions about medium's inherent limitations. The exposure to anime gradually shifted Western industry's thinking, with studios like Pixar and Laika pushing for more sophisticated storytelling, partially inspired by anime's example of what animation could achieve. Despite progress, Western prejudice against animation remains significant, with Academy Awards still segregating animated films from real movies in Best Picture considerations, though anime's critical success continues challenging these artificial hierarchies. Fact 126. Demon Slayer becoming Japan's highest-grossing film ever at over $500 million worldwide, shocked even the anime industry with unprecedented success during pandemic, when theatrical releases faced enormous challenges. The film's timing during period when audiences desperately wanted communal entertainment after months of isolation contributed to explosive success that might not have occurred under normal conditions. Mugen Train's record demonstrated anime's commercial power, competing with any entertainment medium, with the film outgrossing Hollywood blockbusters and proving anime could achieve mainstream success beyond niche audiences. The success raised industry expectations about theatrical anime's commercial potential, while also creating concerns about whether such success was replicable or represented unique confluence of timing, quality, and existing fan base that other films couldn't match. Fact 127. Your Name's unprecedented success, earning over $300 million globally, represented watershed moment when anime film achieved mainstream international success, comparable to major Hollywood releases. The film's success in territories without significant anime fan bases demonstrated that anime could transcend cultural barriers and appeal to general audiences if quality and marketing aligned properly. Your Name's romantic fantasy narrative proved more accessible to mainstream audiences than typical anime films' specific cultural contexts or genre conventions that sometimes alienate viewers unfamiliar with anime's storytelling norms. The commercial success encouraged distributors to invest more in theatrical anime releases, expanding from limited screenings to wide releases with marketing budgets approaching Hollywood films, treating anime as potentially mainstream rather than exclusively niche product. Fact 128. Spirited Away's long-standing record as highest-grossing anime film before Demon Slayer held for nearly 2 decades, with its Oscar win and commercial success establishing benchmark that subsequent films aspired to match or exceed. The film's success demonstrated Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli's commercial peak, with Spirited Away becoming cultural touchstone recognized even by people who don't typically watch anime. The record's longevity reflected how difficult matching Spirited Away's combination of critical acclaim, commercial success, and cultural impact proved, with most anime films achieving at most one or two of these metrics, but rarely all three simultaneously. When Demon Slayer finally surpassed it, some viewed it as ending an era, while others celebrated as evidence that anime continued evolving and finding new audiences rather than remaining fixed in Ghibli's shadow. Fact 129. International earnings growth demonstrates anime films' expanding commercial viability beyond Japan, with major releases now earning comparable or greater revenues internationally versus domestic Japanese box office. The shift toward international audiences influences production decisions, with studios considering global appeal when developing projects rather than focusing exclusively on Japanese market preferences. This globalization creates tensions between maintaining cultural specificity that makes anime distinctive and broadening appeal through more universal storytelling that risks losing unique Japanese perspective that attracted international present fans originally. The earnings growth validates decades of fan enthusiasm globally, proving that anime's audience extends far beyond Japan and that investing in international distribution yields significant returns when executed properly. Fact 130. China, as major market, sometimes exceeds Japanese box office earnings for anime films. Though censorship requirements and political tensions create uncertainties about market access and long-term reliability, Chinese audiences' enthusiasm for anime films demonstrates medium's pan-Asian appeal, with cultural similarities making Japanese content more accessible than Western media while still offering enough distinctiveness to feel fresh and exciting. The Chinese market size makes it crucial for commercial success, with films earning more in China than Japan sometimes, fundamentally shifting anime industry's economics and strategic priorities toward international rather than purely domestic concerns. Political tensions between Japan and China create risks, where films can suddenly be pulled or banned, making Chinese markets simultaneously lucrative and unreliable for long-term planning and investment. Fact 131. Anime films versus live action in Japan sees animation competing commercially with live action on equal footing, with animated films regularly topping box office charts and achieving mainstream success without being relegated to children's entertainment niche. The cultural acceptance of animation as legitimate medium for all ages allows anime films to address mature themes and attract adult audiences without stigma that Western markets' association of animation with children creates. This mainstream status enables anime productions to secure larger budgets and attract top talent, with voice actors, musicians, and animators treating anime films as prestigious projects rather than stepping stones to real live-action work. The equality between animation and live action in Japanese entertainment industry demonstrates cultural attitude where medium is irrelevant compared to story quality and artistic achievement. Fact 132. Home video and streaming revenues have become increasingly important as theatrical windows shrink and audiences shift toward home viewing, with some anime films earning more from home release than theatrical runs. The shift toward streaming changes production economics, with Netflix and Amazon funding original anime films designed for platform release rather than theatrical distribution, creating new business model for anime production. Physical media collectors still support Blu-ray releases with extensive special features, creating premium market alongside casual streaming viewers, demonstrating how anime fandom segments into different consumption preferences and price points. The streaming era's infinite catalog creates discovery opportunities for older films finding new audiences years after release, giving anime films longer commercial lifespan than theatrical-only distribution model previously allowed. Fact 133. Environmentalism across anime films, from Princess Mononoke to Nausicaa to Ponyo, demonstrates recurring concern with humanity's relationship with nature and consequences of industrial development, prioritizing progress over ecological balance. These environmental themes reflect Japanese cultural concepts about nature's divinity and humans' responsibility as stewards rather than masters of environment, with Shinto influences appearing in films depicting nature spirits and sacred forests. The environmental messaging sometimes borders on didactic, but usually maintains nuance, acknowledging that industrial development provides genuine benefits while questioning whether progress's costs outweigh its advantages. The themes resonate internationally as climate change makes environmental concerns universal rather than culturally specific, with anime films' ecological messages gaining relevance as environmental crises accelerate globally. Fact 134. Coming of age as universal theme appears across anime films, from Spirited Away to Your Name to A Silent Voice, with adolescent protagonists navigating transitions from childhood to adulthood through fantastical or realistic challenges. These narratives explore identity formation, accepting responsibility, confronting mortality, and developing complex understanding of relationships beyond childhood's simplicity, making them relatable across cultures despite cultural specific details. The theme's prevalence reflects anime's traditional youth demographic, while also demonstrating that these stories resonate with adults, remembering their own coming-of-age experiences and ongoing struggles with similar themes throughout life. The universality of coming-of-age narratives helps anime films transcend cultural barriers, as the fundamental experiences of growing up remain recognizable regardless of whether characters are Japanese teenagers or anthropomorphic creatures in fantasy worlds. Fact 135. Japanese versus Western storytelling differences include anime's comfort with ambiguous endings, slower pacing, emphasis on atmosphere over plot, and willingness to leave questions unanswered rather than providing complete resolution. These differences sometimes frustrate Western audiences, expecting Hollywood's three-act structure and clear resolution, though fans who appreciate anime often cite these qualities as strengths, distinguishing it from Western entertainment. The storytelling approaches reflect different cultural values about narrative, with Japanese aesthetics appreciating suggestion and incompleteness, while Western traditions favor explicit resolution and closure, providing definitive answers. Understanding these differences helps viewers appreciate anime on its own terms, rather than judging it against Western conventions it never intended to follow or satisfy. Fact 136. Ambiguous endings in anime films, from End of Evangelion to Your Name to Grave of the Fireflies, refuse to provide neat resolution, instead leaving interpretive space for viewers to draw own conclusions. These endings frustrate audiences wanting definitive answers but reward thoughtful viewers willing to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity, treating cinema as space for contemplation rather than consumption. The ambiguous endings reflect Japanese aesthetic principle of the meaningful void or space between things, suggesting that what's unsaid or unresolved possesses as much meaning as explicit statements. Western distributors sometimes pressure for additional ending scenes, providing closure when licensing anime films, demonstrating cultural disconnect about whether ambiguity represents artistic sophistication or frustrating incompleteness. Fact 137. Death and loss handled maturely in anime films, from Grave of the Fireflies to Makia to I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, demonstrates animation's capacity to explore mortality without sanitizing or sentimentalizing these universal experiences. These films present death as permanent rather than reversible, treating loss seriously and allowing characters genuine grief without rushing to consolation or suggesting death was somehow necessary or redemptive. The mature handling of mortality distinguishes anime from much children's animation, which either avoids death entirely or presents it in ways that minimize its finality and emotional impact. The willingness to make audiences sit with sadness and loss without offering easy comfort demonstrates respect for viewers' emotional maturity and capacity to process difficult subjects through animated storytelling. Fact 138. The concept of mono-no-aware, pathos of things, awareness of impermanence underlies many anime films' emotional cores, with beauty heightened by transience in relationships, made precious by their inevitable ending. This aesthetic principle explains anime's fascination with cherry blossoms, whose brief bloom makes them more beautiful than longer-lasting flowers, symbolizing how ephemerality intensifies rather than diminishes value. Films exploring mono-no-aware like Hotarubi no Mori-e or The Tale of Princess Kaguya create bittersweet beauty, refusing to pretend that happiness can last forever while celebrating its temporary existence as meaningful despite impermanence. The concept helps Western viewers understand why anime often feels melancholic even during happy moments, why beauty and sadness intertwine in ways that feel specifically Japanese yet universally relatable. Fact 139. Hope despite tragedy as recurring element prevents anime films from becoming completely nihilistic, even when depicting devastating loss, with characters finding reasons to continue living and meaning in suffering. Films like Grave of the Fireflies or In This Corner of the World present horrific circumstances while suggesting that human dignity, love, and connection persist even when systems fail and institutions destroy. The balance between acknowledging tragedy's reality and finding hope within it creates emotional complexity that simple optimism or pessimism cannot achieve, treating viewers as capable of holding contradictory feelings simultaneously. The hope isn't naive denial of suffering, but rather acceptance that meaning and beauty can coexist with loss and pain, making life worth living despite its inevitable sorrows. Fact 140. Anime movies' enduring legacy lies not in technical achievements or commercial success, but in how they've demonstrated animation's capacity to explore the full range of human experience, with artistic sophistication rivaling any medium. These films have proven that drawn lines and painted colors can move audiences as deeply as photographed reality, that animation's freedom from physical constraints enables, rather than limits, emotional truth and psychological complexity. The films we've explored tonight, from Ghibli's environmental fantasies to Kan's psychological thrillers to Shinkai's romantic longing to the countless others we couldn't cover, collectively demonstrate that anime is not a lesser form of cinema, but rather cinema itself, achieving everything live action can while also accomplishing things that only animation makes possible. And so our journey through anime cinema concludes not with ending, but with invitation to continue exploring, to discover the films we couldn't discuss, to revisit favorites with new appreciation, and to anticipate future works that will expand anime's possibilities in directions we cannot yet imagine. And so we reach the end of our complete journey through anime movies, having explored 140 facts about this remarkable medium that has given the world such beauty, depth, and emotional power. We have witnessed anime's evolution from Disney-influenced beginnings to global phenomenon influencing all animation, from hand-drawn cells to digital production, from niche Japanese entertainment to mainstream international cinema. We have met the masters Miyazaki, Takahata, Kon, Shinkai, Hosoda, Yuasa, and understood how their visions shaped what anime could be and mean. We have explored the music that makes these films sing, the techniques that bring them to life, and the themes that give them lasting resonance beyond their stunning visuals. As you drift into final deep sleep, let these 140 facts dissolve into dreams where you can fly on Totoro through moonlit forests, where you can surf on waves that never break, where you can walk through Spirited Away's bathhouse, or stand beneath your name's falling stars. Let the music, Hisaishi's gentle piano, Radwimps's urgent rock, the silence that speaks louder than sound, carry you into rest. Remember that these films exist waiting for you, that you can return to them whenever you need beauty, wisdom, comfort, or simply the reminder that animation can achieve anything that imagination can conceive and that dedication can create. Sleep peacefully knowing that somewhere animators continue drawing, directors continue dreaming, and composers continue finding melodies that will make future generations cry and laugh and feel deeply. These films are gifts that keep giving, growing richer with each viewing, meaning different things at different times in our lives, proving that the best art grows with us rather than being something we outgrow. May your dreams be as beautiful as the most carefully painted anime background, as moving as the quietest moment between characters learning to understand each other, and as full of wonder as the first time you realized that animation could break your heart and mend it simultaneously. Good night, and thank you for joining this journey through anime cinema's magnificent history and luminous present. And tomorrow, you can begin discovering the countless films we didn't have time to explore, continuing this beautiful, endless conversation between viewers and the art that moves them.